Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, members, officers, democratic services we have tonight, and members of the public. I'm not sure if we have any press here tonight, but welcome to them if there are. And welcome to this planning committee meeting of I've got the 14th of February on the top of my notes here, but I think that was yesterday, so I haven't got any roses for anyone tonight. A little bit of housekeeping, as always. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices by the stairs opposite the lifts that you may well have used to come into the chamber. I will advise you when it will be safe to come back in. We'll ask you to go over to Hawley Square Green. Once it's safe to come back in, as I say, you will be advised to do so. There's also an exit door to my right. Does anybody intend filming this meeting tonight? No, okay, thank you. I will remind members and the members of the public that we are being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel, and if obviously you can't see it tonight, but it will be there, I believe, later tonight or as from tomorrow. Restrictions of mobile phones. I would ask everybody present, please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. Members who would wish to speak under Council Procedure 20.1, I have Councillor Pugh wishes to speak on item RO2 and Councillor Fellows on item 02. Speaking, and these are ward councillors, also on item 05, Councillor Cupp, and again, Councillor Fellows. The following applications have been reserved for public speaking, but members please make a note that there are bottom items on the agenda. Item 4A, which is 3A Roseberry Avenue, Ramsgate. Item 4B, Unit 1 and 2, Belgrove Rd, Margate. Item 4C, 45 Stanley Road, Broadstairs. Item 4D, land adjacent to 12 to 14 Fort Road, Margate. And item 4E, which is the 05 Gore Farm, Gore Farm, Minnis Road, Birchington. Agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence. We have apologies for Councillor Shrub. I have Councillor Dave Saunders standing in for Councillor Shrub. Also for Councillor Paul Moore, I have Councillor Maeve Saunders standing in for Councillor Paul Moore. Agenda item... Chair. Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Everett. Are there any declarations of interest? Please show. No, thank you. Agenda item 3, minutes of the planning meeting which was held on the 18th of January. Do members agree that these minutes of the planning committee meeting held on the 18th of January 2022, 3, I will apologise, I go by my script down here, so I'll correct it as I go along, but please, it's all here. That they are approved and correct. That part wasn't a record of that meeting. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Orban, a seconder. Councillor Coleman Cook. Do members agree? Thank you. I should check the dates as we go along. Agenda item 4, if there are any site visits for the committee, they would take place on Friday the 3rd of March 2023, and normally, as I've mentioned before, round about 9:30 in the morning. Point of information, Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Chair. Point of information for members on agenda item 4E for the development of Gore Farm, Birchington. The published recommendation to defer and delegate to officers for approval subject to the satisfactory completion of a 106 agreement to secure the required highway contribution for maintenance of the proposed traffic light system and resolution of the technical approval process was a requirement of KCC Highways, effectively which required the process of securing an agreement under Section 278 of the Highway Act and the contribution that's paid through that process to occur prior to planning permission being issued. So that was what KCC stated to us. However, from further discussions with KCC, they've stated that the required separate process of the 278 agreement would sufficiently cover the requirements regarding the technical design of the new access and traffic lights, and therefore a legal agreement related to the planning permission is now considered unnecessary. Now, on this basis, there's no need to defer the application to officers, so it's for members to determine this evening. Therefore, officers are recommending that the application be approved, subject to the conditions outlined in the report, with one additional planning condition, and that would be that no development shall take place until the full construction and operation details of the proposed traffic light system and areas of adoption have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority in consultations with the highway authority. And the development should be carried out in accordance with those approved details, and the ground of that condition would be in the interests of highway safety. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. Agenda item 4A, 3A Roseberry Avenue, Ramsgate. Speaking in favour of this application, do we have Mr. Robert Britnell with us tonight? No. I take it you are Miss McFarlane. You have 3 minutes to give your report. Thank you. Could you put your mic on, push the button?
It's there.
Thank you very much, sorry. This is all very new, sorry. Chairman, members, thank you. Unfortunately, my agent can't be here tonight. He has a family emergency. However, he has provided me with what he had intended to say. This application seems to have aroused an organised opposition, much of which shows a lack of knowledge of the actual proposal. Opposition centres around 3 issues: drainage, parking and holiday makers. Taking drainage first, we want to make the site as eco-friendly as possible, recycling grey water for garden irrigation and installing an electrical incinerator toilet to deal with waste. If those ambitions are not achievable, Southern Water has confirmed that there is no objection to us connecting to the sewer in Roseberry Avenue, which connects to a combined sewer at the junction with Harrison Road. As to traffic and parking, the cabin has 1 double bedroom which would accommodate 1 couple at most, who would need only 1 car, and there is space for that on site. The manufacturer of the cabin optimistically refers to a sleeping platform, but that is wholly within the cramped roof slopes with a height of less than 1.5 metres. It's really just a storage space. The risk of more than 2 persons being present is therefore negligible. Roseberry Avenue has a parking problem, with too many car owners and almost a complete lack of off-road parking. That is evident, but this will not make things worse. It has an on-site parking space that won't affect the street. Thirdly, this is not a holiday lodge. It's the wrong building in the wrong place, and no matter how nicely we manage to do the garden, it's never going to be an attractive holiday destination. Our aim is to provide an artists and writers retreat, where those of an artistic or literary bent can come to rest and think and recharge their batteries, perhaps get some work done in solitude and quietude. This will be a small part of the renaissance of Ramsgate that we've been trying to help support with our shop Tales on Moon Lane on Addington Street in Ramsgate. And lastly, Chairman, if it's not our proposition, then what? An appeal for a dwelling on the site was turned down some years ago, but that was due to the details of the scheme, not the principle. If this project fails, some other will come forward. A dwelling perhaps, or a resurrection of the storage yard, the builder's yard that it's got permission for at the moment. We hope that you will feel able to support this original proposal instead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaking against this application is Mr. Andy Doody. Yes, you have again 3 minutes.
Come forward, sir. Sorry, can you come forward and use what?
Thank you. Oh, I'm falling over.
Just steal your moment.
Right.
I'm here this evening to voice strong opposition on behalf of the many residents in Roseberry Avenue, Ramsgate, to the proposed planning application that seeks to construct and have a glamping pod shed on site, renting it out as a holiday let, as it said on the original planning, as well as the disruption that's already been caused by the utility services that are supplied to the site already, with roads and pavements being closed without any warning, leaving damage to the pavement that is still there, mud all over the place. They also left a wide and deep trench that was left wide open and had to be filled in by David from number 5 for public safety. The access track to this site is narrow, and it runs between numbers 3 and 5, who both have a right of way on that track to access their garden gates. The family homes both sides of the track have several windows at ground level, so the privacy of the residents will be a great concern to them especially. Number 3 has 2 babies, number 5 regularly has grandchildren there. And to be able to turn onto this track, which Roseberry Avenue is a very narrow road, and as you say, parking is a real problem. I have a registered enforced disabled bay bang opposite it. I've had my car hit 3 times. You have to turn at a right angle. There's no view to see coming in and out, which is why we've had accidents at the bottom of the road. We've also had problems with emergency services, both for myself with an ambulance and fire engine who couldn't get up the road, and other residents that have had a fire engine just couldn't get up there. Sorry, bear with me. So restrictions on the emergency vehicle access would have a significant impact on the response times for all of the residents in that road and make it more difficult for emergency services. Yes, it was a builder's yard. That was 75 years ago. We've got residents that have lived down there 40 years plus. It hasn't been used as a builder's yard, and it was a storage yard. And I understand for artists, poets, people that want a bit of solitude, I can understand that. I go fishing, that's my respite. But it's alongside Ramsgate, one of the football pitches that's used every Saturday and Sunday. It's overlooked, it's a cramped area. What else can I say? The wooden shed, we've been looking into these pods because I've stayed in one when I've been fishing. And I left it too late, but there's some examples printed out there. They have a habit of catching fire. There's several, right, is that me finished?
If you have a few more lines.
Just a few, mainly the safety on these, because even if they have a barbecue or fireworks, and I know the lady said 1 car, 2 people, but what if their family want to visit or the grandchildren want to come and stay? There can be more than 1 car. The appearance is a worry, and also the drainage. Already this week, Rescue Jet have been down there because there's more problems with the sewers again. There's been constant road closures on Hearson Road where the sewers meet.
I'm going to ask you to wind up, Mr. if you would please.
That'll do me. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll ask the planning officer to outline the report, which I believe is Emma. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the site outlined in red here, so you can see Roseberry Avenue at the bottom of this slide. On the right-hand side of the slide is Hearson Road. So you can see there's an access that runs between number 3 and 5 Roseberry Avenue, and this is the area of land to the rear of the site. So it's a separate plot, unrelated to the other properties around it. So this is just some aerial views of the site. So the plot is here, so this is the application site, and you can see the access that runs along here between numbers 3 and 5 Roseberry Avenue, and again on this one here you can see again the plot, so it's to the rear of numbers 3 and 1 Roseberry Avenue. And then this is just a image taken from some of our older maps. This is from 2018, showing a building previously on the site, and we have evidence of this from the mapping going back as early as 2012. The former use of the site is as an open storage yard. This is the site here, so you can see this is the access running to the application site. So you can see it has an existing drop curb, so it is an established access to the rear of the site. And you can see number 3 and 5 in this photo, and you can see the side windows that have just been referred to within their side elevations that face onto that access. And then this is the access in closer detail. Again, you can see the windows in closer detail. So the application site includes this access and then the area to the right-hand side here. And then this photo has been taken very recently, but I now have some photos just from last year. So this was the access last year when some work was taking place, and this is the rear of the site, just so you can see the this area. So the area referred to is this part here that you can see, and it also extends behind this blue outbuilding you can see on the right-hand side here. And again, another view. So the area extends beyond this plot here on the right, and behind this plot here. So this is just some views taken from Roseberry Avenue, just so you can see the situation, because parking has been mentioned. So just a few photos showing the situation on the roads. So this is obviously taken during the day, but it does show there is some availability within the site, within the road for on-street parking during the day. And you can see this is Hearson Road here. And the application site is just on the left-hand side here. So these are the properties that back on to the application site. And again, just another view in Hearson. So this is the proposal. This is the proposed block plan. So it's showing the proposed holiday let cabin in this location here. So it's a metre from each of the boundaries with the neighbouring properties. You can see a 2 metre high brick wall in this location, 1.8 metre brick wall, and fencing runs around the rest of the site, so there's high boundary treatment around it. Again, you can see the access that runs up to the site here, and this area here is allocated as a parking area associated with the cabin. So you can see the distance to neighbouring properties. There's no concerns regarding light or outlook given the distance, because it's just single storey. In terms of the measurements, it's 2.2 metres to eaves level, so 0.4 above the lowest boundary treatment on the site, and it goes up to 3.9 metres to ridge level. This is just a floor plan showing the unit. So it basically has like a communal space with a bedroom and a bathroom at ground floor level, and then there would be a small sort of a sleeping area at first floor, but not really first floor. It's kind of like a actually, I'll show you in the elevation. Sorry, it's difficult to explain from that. So here you go. This is the elevation. So at this level here within the roof, there is like a floor that would allow potentially some sleeping, but obviously doesn't have full head height, so it's not an actual proper first floor. This is the elevation facing the high boundary treatment. So as I said, it was 2.2 metres to eaves level. So fencing would be only slightly lower than that. So it's considered that there wouldn't be any direct overlook into neighbouring properties from these windows at ground floor level, because the fence and the walls would screen the majority of this window. There's a small viaduct in the roof at this level, and this is the front elevation of the cabin. So these are the entrance doors and the windows that would face onto the parking area, and there's a slight overhang at roof level here. And then this is a rear elevation with a high level window. So it's proposed that this would be obscure glazed, because of at first floor level there is the potential for some overlooking from this window, although it's quite small. So the agent has agreed to the obscure glazing of this window. And this is the other elevation facing, again, just high boundary treatment around the site. So the main consideration is the fact it's previously developed land. It's previously been used as open storage use. So what we're looking at now is a proposed C3 use in the form of a holiday let. So because of the size of the unit, it doesn't meet minimum space standards, so there would be conditions that would restrict the use of this to a holiday let only, so it could never become a permanent form of accommodation. Because it is proposed as a holiday let, we need to consider policy E08 for tourism benefits. So the tourism policy supports tourism where it's sustainably located and of a form and scale appropriate to its surroundings. So given the fact it's single storey and not causing any significant harm in terms of its proximity to neighbouring properties, and given the fact it's quite a sustainable site, so within Hearson Road there's bus routes, so it's quite sustainably located, and there is space for parking, it's considered that it would be supported by this policy. So whilst some neighbours have raised concerns to do with the noise and disturbance to the side windows, consideration needs to be given to the fact that it is an established access, and as you saw from the photo, it does have a drop curb already, and it has previously been used as open storage use. And so we need to look at whether, what the site could be used for and how that compares to this proposed use, and whether there's actually any increased harm as a result of this proposed use. So this is a single bedroom within the cabin, so potentially up to 2 people would be using this site. It's not considered that would be significantly increased noise and disturbance on these neighbouring occupiers when compared to the open storage use that could result in more vehicles using the site, and that there's no restrictions on the use of the site. So it's not considered that there would be a significant increase in noise and disturbance to these neighbouring occupiers. In terms of the highway side of things, again, they have an off-street parking space being proposed with the cabin. Given the fact it's only 1 bedroom, this would be adequate to meet the highway requirements for the site. I think whilst initially highways did raise concerns with some lack of visibility from this access, again, it is an established access, so we're unable to really make any changes to that. Again, vehicles in relation to the storage use could use that access, so there's no objection to the actual design of the access. So it is recommended for approval. A unilateral undertaking has been submitted to secure the SPA contribution, given the fact that it is a C3 use, and this has been submitted. So subject to the conditions that look to restrict it to a holiday let use, it's considered to be an acceptable form of previously developed land, and it's recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. I move the officer's recommendation, which you heard is for approval. Would the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Members. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I can't see any problem with this application. My question is just that the established access route, is that wide enough for emergency vehicles and refuse collection vehicles?
Can you answer that?
No, it wouldn't be wide enough for an actual refuse truck to get down there. So they would have to, for refuse, they would have to bring waste to the front of the site and leave it on the pavement, like neighbouring properties would do. And in terms of fire safety, I think it was noted within the report that it is too far away for potentially a fire engine to reach. But then in these sort of occasions, we do encourage them just to use a sprinkler system, and building control are usually quite happy with that process.
Thank you. Councillor Keane.
Thank you. It just seems a very strange place for a retreat to me, but, that's by the by. But I do have a couple of concerns about it. The first one is that Kent Fire and Rescue weren't consulted on this application. I've noted in the report it says about the distance being enough for the pumping appliance has to be within a certain distance, and it's within that distance. But my question then is, what about ladders? If ladders are required, how do they get ladders up there? So personally, I would have liked to have seen comment from Kent Fire and Rescue on this. The other thing is, I know that it's got the parking space, but is that space big enough for a car to turn, especially given the size of some modern cars these days? So there are a couple of questions I would like.
Thank you. Emma, do you wish? Bear with us, Councillor Keane.
Do you want to bring someone else in?
Yes, I was going to, yep. Councillor Crindon.
Thank you. I wanted to comment on the parking in Roseberry Avenue itself. The pictures that we saw with lots of lovely parking space. In my job, my day job, I often have to visit this area after 6 o'clock at night, and if I can get a parking space anywhere nearer than Dumpton Park railway station, I'm actually whooping with joy. It is absolutely nothing like that. So I just think we need to bear in mind that the pictures we've seen are not actually representative of what it's like when it's not daytime. And that also then leads me to one of my concerns is that I know this is an existing access point, but how easy is it to get in and out of it when there's cars parked opposite? Because that's not a terribly wide road either. It does look as though there's probably room for a parking space in that area based on that drawing there. But that's quite a long distance if you've got a vehicle that can't turn around in that space. That's a long distance to reverse in or out. So those are just my thoughts, and any comments on that would be appreciated.
Thank you. Emma, can you come back? Bear with us.
So in terms of the parking, just looking at the measurements for that space, it's 8 metres by 7.3. So, I mean, it would be tight, but you would be able to get a vehicle in, and you would have to do more than a 3-point turn, I would say, probably to get out, but there would be space to potentially turn for a smaller vehicle within that space. So, and again, the fact it is an established access, again, vehicles linked to the open storage use could go up there and use that space now. So again, it's very difficult for us to object to something that is already established. So I'll just go back and just show the photo again, because I know you're mentioning about sort of visibility and potential for cars to park either side, and obviously you can see there's a full dropped curb along the width of that access. Yes, cars could park close to it, but again, it's just very difficult for us to object to something when it is an existing situation. For us to refuse something on highway safety grounds, there has to be a severe impact on highway safety, and this wouldn't be something to warrant that refusal.
Thank you. Did you pick up, Councillor? No, sir. I'm sorry. I can't do that. I've got Councillor. Councillor King,
there
yes.
hasn't been an answer to the fire and rescue question.
Carry on. Can you answer?
I'll come in on that, Chair, thanks. So yeah, Kent Fire and Rescue weren't consulted, so they're not a statutory consultee for this type of development. As Emma outlined, this is where building control legislation and planning permission sort of cross over, and in terms of building a structure such as this, the requirement would be to satisfy building regs which would deal with fire safety, and as identified, it is fully expected that they'd have to have a sprinkler system to be put into that structure to be safe for habitable accommodation. Yeah, they would. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I have to say that my sympathies are largely with the residents. I think this is a strange application. I think the idea that somebody would want to build a holiday accommodation in that particular position is unusual. No disrespect to the business owner and trying to make the best of the site. And clearly the fact that they intend it to be used for writers and artists and artistic people is not something which we can rely on in planning terms. So we have to consider that it might be used by holiday makers in the future, that current owners might not own it in future. Future owners might have different ideas. The real difficulty we have is that what it could be used for as is probably worse than what's proposed here. And in particular, the vehicle access is there and can be used now. And therefore, despite the fact that we recognise the problems with the road and parking in the road and access in and out of the site, there ain't nothing we can do about that in the planning system. So I'm sort of struggling really to find any grounds on which we could reject it and reliably expect that decision to be upheld. So one I'll ask about is that the existing use is, well, it's been used for building storage. We think it's been a builder's yard at some point in the historic past. presumably those uses are things which take place during the working day. This use, one would assume, will take place overnight and could result in noise from that kind of use. Is that something that the committee could take into account, or would that be unreasonable of itself?
Yes, it is the case that a storage use is more likely to be during the day, but as far as we're aware, there's no restrictions on the use of this site at all. So whilst that is more likely to be the case that it would be used during the day, it could be used at weekends, it could be used Sundays, and there's no restriction of what time it would stop being used, because we're not aware of any restrictions on it. So yes, with a residential use, you could have people walking along the lane late at night that you might not get from an open storage use. But again, we are talking only one unit of accommodation here with one bedroom. So it's not likely to be a significant impact from noise and disturbance from one or two people that would be using this unit. I think if it was if more than that, then maybe we could be considering it. But with only one or two people, it's not likely to cause significant harm to, again, warrant refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Orban.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I do concur with some of my colleagues in relation to the location for this. It does seem slightly weird, but however, looking at the building itself, where it's situated, I can't see it. There's no problem with the building, height-wise, intrusiveness, or anything of that nature. If you're building a house there, you wouldn't be looking at noise, would you? You wouldn't be looking at someone going to cause noise in a house, because you can deal with that in other ways through environmental health if there are noise issues. So I'd dismiss that as far as planning concerns are. The access, of course, is narrow, but as a builder's yard, they wouldn't be walking up there with a wheelbarrow, would they? They'd be going up there with a van. They would have turned around and come back. There's been a building on the site already, as we've seen. So I can't see a problem why we would refuse it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Orban. I'm sorry, Madam, I'm sorry, I cannot allow you to speak. I'm sorry. Madam, I am sorry, I'm not allowed to let you speak. I'm sorry. Are there any other members wish to speak? Okay, you've heard the recommendation is for approval. Could members show if they approve this application? Those against? Abstentions? Okay, for approval as well. Approval. That is carried and approved. Thank you, members. I will just give a moment while members of the public thank you for that, members. Moving on to agenda item 4B, which is Unit 1 and 2 Belgrove Road, Margate. Speaking in favour of this application is Miss Liz Gibney, if she's there.
Evening.
I hope I've pronounced that right.
That's fine, thank you. I've
Thank
had
you.
worse.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Liz Gibney. I'm a partner at Lee Evans Partnership, and I'm speaking this evening on behalf of the applicant. I'll be brief, but speak in support of approval for this scheme and ask that you vote in favour of the proposal this evening. The scheme before you represents a significant investment in the continued regeneration of this part of Margate. The aim is to revitalise a brownfield site within the urban confines of central Margate through the redevelopment of a highly sustainable location a range of public transport options in an interesting way that reflects the unique and exciting character of Margate and its much celebrated seaside and beachfront location. The scheme will breathe new life into the existing building, further re-energising this part of the town, significantly looking for investment just beyond the seafront. The proposal will provide 10 high-quality new homes offering improvement to the local housing mix, and 3 commercial premises at ground floor level. There will be no loss of commercial uses, although they will be different. In respect of heritage, we consider the scheme provides an appropriate contextual response to the setting of the site. A heritage statement prepared by a specialist conservation architect directly informs the proposal. Comments were received from the conservation officer after the applicant had informed of the intention to refuse the scheme, and we haven't been able to discuss this since, which we would have liked to have done. In respect of overlooking, the officer records that this concern could be overcome by the installation of privacy screens. This suggestion had not been previously shared with the applicant, but I can confirm that the applicant would accept a condition to provide details of balcony screens to overcome these concerns. This would resolve proposed refusal reason 2. We would also consider conditions to look at anything to do with materials or colour or appearance. Refusal reasons 3 and 4 relate to Section 106 agreement and SAM's contributions. The applicant has no objection at all to preparing the necessary heads of terms and financial contributions to resolve these issues. This would resolve proposed refusal reasons 3 and 4. Overall, the principle of development is acceptable in this location as agreed by the officer. There are no technical objections to the proposal, including matters of highways, drainage, subject to planning conditions and contributions. The applicant agrees to all conditions and contributions suggested to date. In view of the council not demonstrating a 5-year housing land supply, the proposal will directly contribute to the aims of the action plan in delivering housing and accords with the objectives of the MPPF in delivering development in sustainable locations. On this basis, we submit this scheme as of being of real merit and acceptable in terms of planning policies. When weighed against other material considerations, encourage you to support a resolution to grant planning and be a positive part of creating new homes in Margate. We think this is a real regeneration scheme that really aligns with the vision and the strategy for the whole town, and looking at regeneration rather than just preservation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Speaking against the application is Miss Geraldine Scott, if she's there.
I'm here, thank you, Chair.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm a resident at Grosvenor Place and I strongly object to the planning application for the change of use from the existing commercial use to a mixed-use development. First of all, I want to state that I have no objection to the commercial units at the development. There are already existing commercial units on the site, nor do I have any objection to the proposal to develop self-contained flats above new commercial units. Housing is needed in the area, and any proposal to increase supply is welcome. My primary objection to the scheme is the external appearance of the development and how it will impact on the surrounding area, which is a designated conservation area. Aesthetically, the proposed design would not enhance the attractiveness of the local area. Instead, it has the potential to become a local landmark for all the wrong reasons, an eyesore rather than an asset. The colours for the facade are garish, yellow glazed bricks, orange vertical metal cladding, dark green lower elevation and black doors and windows. The design appears to be a nod to the dreamland heritage of the surrounding area. However, it is a residential building primarily and therefore not in keeping with the vernacular of the surrounding area. The rear elevation with its proposed metal cross braces, mesh and timber fins would blight the view down Eaton Hill from Grosvenor Place and isn't complementary to the architecture along Eaton Road. 3 additional floors on top of the existing building would greatly increase the density on this site. If additional floors were in keeping with the existing building and the access to the flats were enclosed rather than external to the building, that might prove a more attractive proposition. However, the design as currently conceived is disruptive rather than sympathetic. The external access walkways on the external elevation would mean that the neighbouring properties would be overlooked, thus impacting on the quiet enjoyment of residents. Finally, the lettering, the fund starts here, proposed to sit above the building, is entirely not in keeping within the conservation area. It is completely unnecessary and, dare I say, tacky. For these reasons, I would urge the committee to refuse the planning application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaking in favour of this application is Cabinet Member Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Chair. I come to you before members of the Planning Committee today in my role as Cabinet Member for Economic Development. I called in this application to committee because I believe that this is a very good use of this site, particularly of a brownfield site in Margate Town Centre. People have spoken about signs and distractions and not in keeping with the area. Around the corner on Marine Terrace, we've got the big flamingo sign, which used to be illuminated many years ago. I think part of that, and maybe part of why the sign has been included, is that it's part of the kind of, the kind of the thriving nature of Margate as a seaside town, and why many people come to the area and come and visit and have fond memories of coming to Margate. And in my view, I don't feel that this will have a negative impact, particularly on heritage, on the conservation area. I do understand that it's sited within the Margate conservation area, but at the same time, I think this is an incredibly inventive and interesting design. And I liken it very similar to the Margate Contemporary, the Turner Contemporary, sorry. Probably shouldn't get the name of that wrong. It's definitely the Turner Contemporary. In that there were many residents that may have been concerned about the proposed designs of the Turner Contemporary many years ago, and now it's almost a natural part of the frontage along Margate Harbour there, and I think it looks fantastic. I think considering the pressures that we have on developments, particularly on agricultural land, I think that the use of a brownfield site in one of our town centres in this not just inventive way, but in the surrounding area, there are many commercial and retail units that now have flats above them. I think this is the way that post-COVID we need to be encouraging people to move back into our town centres, to come back into our town centres and live in the town centres. And I think that this application and these proposals really embody that. I acknowledge that the design and the colourings are quite striking, but again, I think that much of architectural design has always pushed the envelope and the boundaries of what should be accepted, and I think that should be applauded for it. It's mentioned within the officer's report and the recommendation and on fears of height, and whilst I appreciate that heights or an increase in height can be a concern, particularly in the adjoining building next to it that kind of faces Marine Terrace and the road coming up here to Cecil Square, the building itself will be no taller than that, and I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a striking height. And of course, if you've got the entrance to Dreamland behind you, across the other side of Belgrove Road, and you're looking at this proposal site, right behind you in the distance, we've got Arlington House. And, nothing is ever going to dwarf the height of that. So I'm a bit concerned that one of the reasons for a recommendation of refusal is height, when this is nowhere near as tall as probably one of the tallest towers on the Isle of Thanet. It's mentioned as well within the recommendation of a refusal, apologies Chair, I will sum up, the recreational pressure on the Thanet coast. Now, I think that this is a null and void point because we need to be encouraging people to live closer to the sea and enjoy our coastline. And tied in with that, the amount of money that is coming into the area in investment and with the Margate Town deal and Margate Digital, I think we'd be absolutely mad to refuse this application, particularly when somebody wants to come along and wants to better use a brownfield site in a town centre where we want people to come back and live. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pugh. I have down that Councillor Fellows wished to possibly speak on this. Councillor Fellows on 20.1.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. I'm a Margate boy, brought up in Margate and Cliftonville. Margate's in my heart, the same as yourself, Chair. Over the last several years, I've watched Margate rejuvenate, but I'm not sure where Margate is on the ladder of regeneration, near the middle rung, I'd say, maybe, I guess. And we've had to rely on inward investment and grants to continue this rejuvenation. It's a long road, 40 years of decay is not going to be reversed overnight. Now, I hadn't really taken much notice of this application until recently, when I was surprised to see in the local news report that it was up for refusal. Surely this scheme will be a start of a rejuvenation for this area of Margate. It's a brownfield site as such, an empty space above a commercial unit. Surely this is the kind of development that we should be encouraging, and such investment would bring up this area. This also could be a catalyst for further regeneration close by. I think refusal would send out the wrong message to investors as well. Planning officers determined the proposal of this scheme to be incongruous. I had to look up the dictionary meaning of incongruous. It says not in harmony or in keeping with the surroundings or other aspects of something. Well, opposite is a theme park, a car park, around the corner is kebab shops, opposite is a row of flashing lights above amusement arcades, Wetherspoons, etc. So I'm not sure where it's not keeping in harmony. In just a few months' time as well, I'm sure the same officers will be encouraging you to allow thousands of houses on beautiful green fields of Westgate and Birchington. There's going to be nothing more incongruous as that. So as a councillor, I support this application, but I must say that I've no connection with anybody here involved in this application as well. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fellows. I'll ask the planning officer now to detail the report, please, and I believe it's Ian.
Thank you, Chair. The application site is outlined in red. So the application is for the redevelopment of the site, including 3 commercial units on the ground floor with a 3-storey extension above the existing building, creating a total of 10 flats. The main considerations for members are the principal development, the impact on the character appearance of the area, with specific reference to the conservation area and the adjacent listed buildings, as well as highways concerns and all other environmental considerations under the Planning Act. So the site, as mentioned, is located within the Margate Conservation Area. There is the Margate Seafront Conservation Area, which is the dividing line is down Belgrove Rd, so it's the other side of the road. And the nearest sort of listed buildings are in red on that plan. So you've got 12 and 12A marine gardens, so not terrace. I was going to get that wrong at some point. Started early. So the site behind is worth mentioning because that's actually an allocated housing site in the current local plan, with a notional number of dwellings for 6 for that site. Again, no committed development on that site. But it's just for reference for members so they're aware. So this is the photo of the site itself from Belgrove Road. You can see at the moment, obviously, the business. I'm sure most members are very familiar with this site. This is a view just further back, so you can see Flamingo in the left-hand side there, the blue building. You can see the rear of 12A there, and then you've got Eaton Road and Eaton Hill on the right-hand side. So then looking from Dreamland Car Park, you've got the building there. And then this is the view looking from in front of the side elevation of the Flamingo back towards the building. You can see the scaffolding on 12A, Marine Gardens. Then you've got the view from adjacent to the clock tower, so you can see Flamingo and then the listed terrace on the left-hand side. And you can see the building in the gap down Belgrove Road. And then this is the view further across the other side of the road to just show again the height of those buildings on the seafront and the height and perspective that you've got the view through there. So this is a more detailed view at the back of Marine Gardens. So you can see the window arrangement, you can see the gap with the sort of single-storey unit at ground floor between the 2 buildings. So this is now a view looking from Eaton Road. So you can see in the distance the rear of 12 and 12A, as mentioned. So, and what will be quite small on the image, but you can see the pitch of the roof where the mouse pointer is there, which is the existing single-storey building. And then this is a view down Eaton Hill. So the single-storey, sort of high single-storey building with the corrugated iron roof is not part of this site, so it's directly adjacent to the building. So the building in question is the one with the gable at the end and the sort of porthole window in it. So you can see there's quite a significant level difference when you come down Eaton Hill, so with the buildings at single-storey that obviously lower down. And then just some aerial images just to give you the context. So I think, again, members will be very familiar with where this is. So as mentioned, Eaton Hill was just where we were looking at the site from. You've obviously got Margate Seafront and Marine Gardens. And then just to give you the isometric view from Google, you can see property on Eaton Road, number 2, set back from the frontage, and then you can see, again, the properties on Eaton Hill running down, and the site to the rear, as mentioned, as well as then the back of the properties on Marine Gardens. And then this is the view looking back the other way, so you can see then the back of the properties on the terrace with the flamingo again, and you can see that single-storey building, and that the site obviously extends all the way down to the back of number 12A. So this is a perspective view that's been submitted by the applicant of the proposal. We'll go through the precise plans to be built, but I thought it would be worth starting with this image. So it's obviously a modern design building, but it's building on top of the existing structure, so you can see the gable of the existing building there. So it's, as mentioned, commercial on ground floor. There are 3 units. There's also parking on ground floor for the flats above. So the frontage at ground floor would be painted brickwork with, as mentioned, the black windows and the sort of shutter doors. Then at first and second floor you have yellow clad brick, and then at the rear and then on the highest floor you've got the orange vertical metal cladding with front balconies all the way across the front, and as the aforementioned signage right at the top of the building. So looking at the plans themselves, we've got the existing block plan here. The whole site is being developed, so it's literally on top of the existing building there with the 3-storey extension. So then you've got the existing western elevation, so this is the Belgrove Rd frontage elevation, and then this is the proposal. So the ridge height of the existing building is being increased. Obviously the very tip of that pitched, that gable end is being increased by about 6.8 metres, with a similar increase in the eaves height, with the overall eaves height though from the existing eaves height increasing to by about 9.5 metres. Now currently there is obviously, as mentioned, there's an existing building on the site. This has been looked at in terms of whether or not what the impact of that building has on the conservation area. Obviously you've seen from the images there's lots of adverts on the front. It's obviously been changed over time. It's got a very commercial frontage, but obviously the side elevations do retain some of the original brickwork. So in a sort of balanced approach, we think there's a sort of neutral impact on the conservation area, but obviously they are proposing to retain it and obviously retain those side elevations, which would obviously be visible when looking at this proposal. So looking at the side elevation of the building, so this is the existing elevation that I was just talking about, so that you can see the back of the listed properties behind. So this is the side elevation. So again, the front element, which is set in from the frontage ridge balconies, is the brick clad element of first and second floor, and then the orange metal cladding is the predominant part of the side elevation here. So this is where this side elevation is not set in significantly from the existing side of the building presently on site. So this is the creates a full 4-storey building on the Eaton Hill elevation. This is the existing rear elevations. This is the east elevation, and then this is the rear elevation as proposed. So the main access to the flats effectively create the walkways at the rear, as mentioned. So what you've got here is metal cross braces and with timber cladding on the element on the right-hand side of the image that you can see, which is the stair core. So we'll look at the floor plan so you can see that. So we've also got then the inset elevation at the top there, so you can actually see that this is where the doors and windows actually are for accessing the flats. And again, we'll look at the floor plan so you can see that in a bit more detail. And there's a perspective later on to kind of give you the material palette. So this is the north elevation existing, so this is the one that faces the listed buildings. So again, similar in design in the sense of the brick cladding, the yellow brick cladding to the front of the extension, but with the orange metal cladding to the rear. Now the middle element here that you can see where hopefully the mouse pointer is, and the front elements are set in from this side elevation. So you'll see on the floor plans that these have been set in, which was following concerns that officers have raised about the impact on the listed building. These elements were set in discussions. Then you've got, this is a section just showing the different levels internally. So this is that elevation, that north elevation. There's the terraces that you can see at second floor level, and then you've got the balconies at the front of first floor, second floor, and then the terrace and front balcony at the top floor. And again, we'll look at the floor plans to show that relationship with the neighbours a bit more detail. So this is the proposed street scene, just comparing the two. So you can see the listed building on the left-hand side, obviously with the advert, which you'll have seen from the photos. So you can see the full scale of the building. So the concerns that officers have relate to the scale and sort of ensuing design that almost comes out of the scale, and the impact that has on the conservation area and the impact on the setting of the listed building. So in our view, the scale competes with the listed terrace. Belgrove Road is not the seafront, it's not in that hierarchy in terms of pattern of development historically, and therefore we do feel that this is conflicting with the predominant form and heritage assets in the conservation area. Now, in terms of the scale of the building, obviously it has been articulated, so you saw from the side elevations that the frontage at first floor and second floor are sort of, well, first and second are set back the same amount, but with balconies, and then the third floor is set back sort of even further with the articulation set in at the side, which you can now sort of see from this elevation here on the left-hand side of the bottom image. We don't consider that this would actually alleviate the bulk and scale of the building that's being proposed, with the choice of materials making the building even more prominent. I mean, that is the point of it, but obviously we have particular concerns about that, and indeed the incongruity of actually the proposal as it is. In terms of the design itself, we feel the building at the moment has quite a horizontal emphasis, but obviously it is very low lying. It doesn't impact on the general form of development that you have in the area, which broadly has a vertical emphasis when looking at the style of fenestration that you've got in the buildings. Obviously you can see the building on that elevation on 2 Eden Hill, and that is pretty common when you go down the roads, which are more residential than they are commercial behind the seafront. And the change in the horizontal emphasis that the proposal would have with quite a top-heavy design would, in our view, appear bulky in its context, and overall that is of concern. In terms of the side elevation from Eaton Hill, we saw from the image the fact that there is a change in levels as you go down Eaton Hill, and obviously this is an elevation that sits almost flush with the side elevation of the existing building. And this would then become a 4-storey building, and almost a full 4-storey building with a very different material to the palette of materials that you find in the area. So we do consider that would be out of keeping in scale and kind with the development in the locality in this more residential side or to the south of the seafront. And so that is considered to result in harm in our view. Now, in terms of the benefits of the development and obviously what it is providing, I'm just going to go through the proposed units of accommodation. So as mentioned, there are 10 parking spaces that are provided at the ground floor. You can see that you have one large commercial unit in the middle of the building and then 2 smaller commercial units in the sort of still having sort of shop frontages. On the left-hand side, you've got the stair core, you've got bin storage, you've got cycle storage serving the flats. So then you've got the first floor here, so you can see the stair core at the rear, as mentioned, with that first walkway. You can see that's the access to the flats. As mentioned, all the units have balconies at the front, so we are in a town centre location. These are 2 and 3 bed units. It is obviously very difficult when a site is fully developed to provide private amenity space, and therefore, even though none is directly provided, with these amenity spaces, we wouldn't think that there is a reason to suggest that the accommodation is substandard in any way. They are all, sizable units that are being proposed, and that will provide a benefit by virtue of the housing that it provides. However, looking at the relationship with neighbours is a particular concern with regards to the terrace, and obviously you've already heard the the applicant's representative mentioning about the potential for privacy screens. The concern of officers relates to the left-hand side of the image that you're seeing, specifically the fact that the terrace obviously extends all the way to the side, to the rear, and you will have seen from the photos the fact that you have rear-facing windows at the back of 12A and 12 that face directly towards this site. They are those two units, so 12 and 12A, constitute 6 flats at first, second, and third floor level in total, all with windows that face out, including bedroom windows at second and third floor level. And then this is the top floor, again showing the terraced area on the left-hand side, but then again showing these are 2 units, so these are obviously very large units with the external walkway at the rear. So this is the proposed roof plan, so you can see the articulation, different design that you've got there in terms of the pictures that have been proposed. Just to go back to the 3D representations that have been provided, these are useful in showing the different articulations, although we would obviously ask members to make sure that looking at the sections and the street scenes rather than sort of the actual relationship with other buildings, because these haven't been verified by officers as being accurate. But it is important to see the different articulation that is being proposed in the building and that palette of materials that's being shown. So this is the rear elevation, so this is to give you a bit more of an idea. So the walkway is being covered by these elements. Obviously, this is a concern of officers in terms of the view down Eaton Hill due to the scale of the building that is being proposed. So in the report, it outlines the additional requirements for this type of development, and there are consultee comments which include a number of conditions which would be recommended to be put on if the application was to be approved. Highways have commented that they consider the fact that they've provided 10 parking spaces sufficient for the accommodation that's been provided, and indeed it is in effectively a town centre location. Off-street parking would not be required for a development such as this. It's very sustainably located, so it is a benefit to provide the 10 units. As already outlined by a few speakers, there are planning obligations that would be required for a development of this scale, as well as a contribution towards the special protection area and the mitigation to avoid increased recreational pressure, which would mean the development would be contrary to the habitat regs. But overall, in conclusion, officers consider that there is benefit for 10 units being provided here, and that is a contribution to housing supply, but it is considered due to the design and scale that the development would result in harm to the conservation area and the setting of listed buildings, whilst resulting in overlooking to the neighbouring property, and therefore is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I move the officer's recommendation. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Councillor Crittenden.
Thank you. I find myself agreeing almost entirely with Councillor Pugh on this one. I like the design, I like the colours, I like the way it ties in with the seafront.
First time I've ever heard that in the chamber.
Sorry. We might disagree on the bunch of white boxes down the road, but which you praised. But I do think actually it is a very positively designed. It fits in with the area. I appreciate that I'm looking at the conservation area next to it, as drawn on the lines. But all in all, I like it. I like the design and the impact, and we see how modern architecture can sit alongside historic areas very well in other areas, if you go down the Thames or whatever. And I don't see any reason why this, which does tie in very well with our seafront image, should be any different to that. So I like it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rd.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There are 4 reasons for refusal offered by the officers, and I would suggest that 2, 3 and 4 are pretty much beyond argument. 2 refers to direct overlooking, which I don't think this committee ought to be sanctioning. 3 refers to the lack of the legal agreement to secure delivery of the planning obligations, and 4 refers to the SAM contribution. which is obligatory with new housing development, none of which are in front of us. So I think this committee is in no position to approve this application, I have to say. So I think we ought to be refusing it. I do have some sympathy with the debate about what it looks like and whether it's in keeping with the area and the effect on the conservation area adjacent. I'm not quite sure what I think about it, to be honest with you. I think it's one of those that you really need to think about in the round. I don't think it's impossible to put a taller building on that site. I find its appearance quite garish, but then I think that the existing building is fairly unpleasant as it looks in the state that it's in. So I think you'd have to balance those two things up. I'll be interested to see what members have to say, but I think this committee is in no position to approve this application tonight, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Ritt. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very difficult decision, this one, because Councillor Crittenden and I quite often agree, but I must disagree with her in this circumstance. I think it's overdevelopment. I think it's too tall for the area, and I think it's the most ugliest building I've ever seen. I just think it's too garish myself, but I do agree with Councillor Everett as well. I think it's a very difficult one to call. Should we be approving it? Not too sure. But I think if we're going to put something in this position, it should. I don't object to modern, but I just think it's too tall, too overdeveloped, and possibly could be toned down just a bit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've got a range of views tonight. I don't mind the height of it. I can see it being in that location quite comfortably. But I do think the colours of the design, they're just gaudy. A few years down the line, I think it would look very tacky. And therefore, I think it's out of keeping with that area. A nice, light, modern design would be fine, but I can't approve of what the proposal is. Also, where is this the fun starts here going?
So on the roof.
At the moment. Councillor Orban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Interesting, isn't it? It's an interesting development proposal. I actually think it does appear to be bulky, and the reason to have the conservation area is to enhance the area. That's what it says. That's legislation. You should be looking to enhance the area. Now, obviously, as a point of view, some people may say it enhances, and some people may say it doesn't. It would certainly brighten up the area, and that is for sure. I'm just mindful of what the applicant's agent said at the start of this item, Chair, that they were willing to enter into agreement in relation to Section 106, etc., etc. So, I think we need to bear that in mind, and maybe members might decide that it should go back to officers before a decision is taken to iron out those issues as to what the agent has said. I would appreciate if Mr. Livingston could take us back to the rear, that one. Whoop, come back. So, I mean, that is, that's just barking mad, to be quite honest. And I don't think that fits in and enhances the area at all. So I think that the applicant needs to rethink this. I've got no problem with the bulk. I've got no problem with the height, etc., etc. The only other issue that I have, and I just spotted it, and in relation, we're talking about adverts and all that kind of stuff. What's on the top? If you go back to number 12A, you've got a large advert holding on the side of a Grade 2 listed building. So it's obviously been there donkey's years, but the council can take action to get rid of that. So I'm just saying, it is difficult, yep. But I think overall, I can't support it purely because of the rear elevation. The rest, I think, is absolutely fine.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Councillor Wing.
I'm conflicted because I think 80% I'm okay with this, and if you look at the objections, it was certain elements of the build that I find are in conflict with with either the neighbours or the conservation area. So I'm bang on with Councillor Alban. The back just looks mad. I don't understand the back openness of the back at all. That definitely is, whoa, what's going on here? The sign I don't understand on the top either. There's no relevance to the building or to the surrounding. But I think it's a good use of a piece of land. I welcome the fact that we're putting additional residential units in there. There's parking on site. Waste seems to be dealt with. Two of the issues that we often bring up. I don't think, and the issues that Councillor Everett brought up need addressing, and I think maybe the developer or the applicant just needs to rethink things and tweak, listen to the objections and listen to what we're saying and maybe tweak those things. I definitely think the colours are I can accept something that's different because I think we need to create new heritage that for the future, but I think maybe that the colours don't fit well with me. I love the fact they've kept a part of the old heritage and built it into the block on the end, so I'm sort of 80% we're there, but that 20% needs to be addressed, I think, to make it the full thing. So I think I'm probably going to vote for refusal, but I hope it comes back being tweaked, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I can understand this is subjective to some extent, but for me it's the imaginative and most appropriate use of a brownfield site, offering 10 units of much needed housing with parking, as well as commercial units. Margate now offers a mix of traditional, retro and modern architectural design, and the present site is rundown and not aesthetically pleasing at all. I believe we should be encouraging such an exciting development and encouraging investment into the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Councillor Dave Saunders.
Thank you, Chairman. I've looked at the report and I've listened to the arguments. Members will know that I tend to be a little bit of a traditionist, and on that basis I don't think the conservation argument stands up for scrutiny based on what we've seen and based on knowing the area. I'm also not a great fan of industrial style architecture, but I've accepted it elsewhere and it does blend in, and I think something that looks very garish on day one can grow on you. I wasn't a fan of the Turner contemporary design. I thought the one that fell into the sea was far more aesthetically pleasing, but on the basis of looking at what we're being offered and the investment that's being put forward, and having listened to the applicant's agent with regards to the preambles, I'm minded not to support the planning officer's recommendation. I think that this needs, as other members have said, I think this needs to go back. I think we need to have some rethought on some of the items. I think we need more information on some of the items. I'm not proposing that the colour scheme gets amended, because I'm sure that we would learn to live with that sort of colour, and it's coming. I'm afraid, traditionally as though I am, it's going to change and things are going to change. So at this point in time, I'm not going to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Wright.
I'm just looking at this, and the sign at the top, I mean, that says it all. Margate used to be about fun. This building will bring back the fun to Margate.
Thank you. Councillor Garner.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I can agree with a lot of what's been said by a number of members about the need for for these 10 units and the need for that site to be developed. But as Councillor Everett said, I don't think we can get away. We can discount points 3 and 4 because they can be sorted out with the applicant. But we can't get away from point 2, which is that there is overlooking on one side of the building that is unacceptable. So if we want this to be developed, then I guess we do need to refuse it and go back to the drawing board to get it redesigned appropriately. And I guess my one question I would have is, I assume there have been some conversations, have there, with the applicant about this, any to-ing and fro-ing about what would or what wouldn't be acceptable. Maybe that is my question. Have there been conversations, and if there hasn't, then can there be?
I'm sorry, I know I'm not allowed to speak, but we've been very frustrated that we haven't been able to have any conversations
I
about
must stop you there. I know you want to say another word, but if you don't mind. Ian, come back. This is you, Councillor Garner.
Thanks. I think just to clarify with regards to the reasons for refusal, obviously, the motion on the table is to refuse with the 4 grounds. If members were to vote down that motion, then obviously members could propose a motion to effectively give back to officers to look at the issues that have been raised and specific reference those issues, to potentially invite amended plans. I think in terms of the engagement point, the council did have pre-application discussions with the applicant and did provide comments on the development as proposed, and did raise issues with the scale in terms of the proposal. Obviously, reference has been made and amendments have been received when the application came in for the different articulation in terms of, you can see on the image there on the left-hand side, but we didn't consider that to be sufficient to alleviate the overall concerns that we have with the development.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Crittenden.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to my comments earlier. I do agree with my colleagues about the view from the rear. It is not actually as good as the view from the front.
Thank you. Councillor Roseski.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Looking at it, I think the applicant's spokesperson mentioned that the screening could be done to cure any overlooking on that side of the building, so not too big an issue. Again, as my colleagues were saying, this is a big investment for Margate. A lot of money will be spent to produce 10 homes and extra commercial business units downstairs. I think this is something that we've got to, look forward to, and regeneration is going to be something that Margate, Ramsgate and even Broadstairs is going to need at some point. And therefore, I'd be looking at going against the officer's advice on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Roseski. Looking around, I can't see any other members wish to speak. Thank you, members. Right, I put this to you. The recommendation is to refuse. Those who wish to refuse this, could they please show? Sorry? Yes, fine. Okay, and those against? Any abstentions? Right, I'm looking to my colleague here.
That's 4. It's 5 to 9. Yes, it's 4.
So it's fallen. Right, that has fallen. So I'm coming to Ian. Once again, please.
So, members have a number of options. Do you want... Councillor Orban's already put his hand up.
Councillor Orban.
Yeah, Chair, probably Mr Livingston's going to say what I want him to say, see what I mean. No pressure. And that is, Chair, for the things that members have brought forward in relation to this development, for further discussions to take place and for this to be referred back to officers for discussions with the applicant's agents concerning the reasons for refusal to overcome those. So I think we're all, most of us are agreed that that this development should take place. And I would just make one comment, Chair, if I may, which is against what people have talked about. But just because someone's pumping money in, it doesn't necessarily mean that we've got to approve it because they're pumping money in. It's got to be right. And it's because otherwise you can end up with loads of rubbish. But I do think that this could be something that would be agreeable within Margate and within that space. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Take on board what you started with there. Is that a proposal?
It is sorry, Chair, it is if Mr Livingston would file it around to make it
sound better,
more legible.
Thank you, Chair. I think the one thing I'd say is that there are a lot of different elements that members have mentioned. So some members have different concerns, obviously mentioned to the rear elevation. Some members are concerned about the scale. Some members are concerned about the palette of materials and whether or not they need to be toned down. Obviously, the applicant's agent is here to hear those concerns. I think the motion to put what you've said into words would be effectively for it to be deferred to officers to seek amendments to address the concerns of members with regards to, and I'm going to keep it quite generic, the impact on the character of the area, and then to be brought back to members for determination. You need a seconder to that if Councillor Orban agrees with that motion.
Councillor Everett, I think Councillor Everett had his hand. Okay, you've heard that, members. Obviously, there are a few concerns. Can understand some of them. Could show of hands, please. Those against that. I think you're on your own there, Councillor Bayford. Am I making sense? I'm sorry. You've heard what has been said about going back to the applicant with what's been mentioned here tonight, with possibly a few changes, with what's been stated of concerns, has been proposed by Councillor Orban, counselled by Councillor Everett. Are you happy that that happens, or are you not? So,
in favour of that application, Chair, if I can put words
Sorry,
in
Chair.
there.
Yep.
Point of order. I'm slightly confused from the corner here. My idea was that this was to refuse permission, and that fell, so therefore permission has been agreed for this.
Yes. Yep. Please, members, please. Yeah.
So there's currently no motion on the table, so it's not automatically refused. If the motion has fallen, a new motion has to be proposed before a decision is reached. So if members agree with Councillor Orban's motion, they would vote in support of it. However, if you actually disagree and you think it should be refused, or you think it should be approved outright as it is, you would disagree with that motion to seek those amendments. But obviously what we're trying to find is an overall perspective of members to potentially take back to the applicant. Thank you.
No, sorry, Councillor Pugh, I'm sorry. Right, do members understand now what's been said? And that's what I was trying to get over to you. A proposal has been put forward, it's been seconded. I've asked you to vote on that. If you agree with that proposal, please show. Those against? Oh, that has been carried. Thank you, members. Okay. Thank you, members. Agenda item 4C, which is number 45 Stanley Road, Broadstairs. Speaking in favour of this application is Mr. Philip Lewis. Mr. Lewis, are you there?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Lewis. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, my name's Philip Lewis. I'm the owner of 45 Stanley Road. Stanley Road has an eclectic mix of housing evolved over a number of decades. There is no particular common theme or architectural style across the properties. It is not in a conservation zone nor an area of high townscape value. Our house shares very few characteristics with other properties in the area and is in fact one of the least attractive houses in the street. It has overlarge and poorly positioned dormers and an unattractive expansive roof profile. In short, 45 Stanley is an unimproved 1950s house, now in much need of renovation to bring it up to modern standards of energy, efficiency, safety and comfort. We have spent considerable time with local architects to develop an interesting contemporary home with a carefully considered, understated appearance that is intended to add variety and quality of design in Broadstairs. We have taken on the points made by the planners to adjust the colour scheme and ensure the property does not significantly extend the current footprint. We have existing permitted development permission for a 2-storey structure plus loft with a much higher ridge line. Please note the dashed line on the proposed elevation you'll see later. However, our proposal is a much more modest alteration to the current building, retaining the existing ridge height with the exception of a small central skylight. The proposed dormer is smaller in height and deliberately asymmetrical, both to add interest and to aid the light diffusion within the property. In support of water conservation and local biodiversity, we are adding green roofs and water capture. We are retaining the full garden area. Our neighbours are particularly pleased that we are not building upon the garden. We're using local builders and responsibly sourced high-quality materials sympathetic to the area, Kent tiles, timber cladding, locally manufactured windows and doors. Finally, this is our home, which we hope to spend many years enjoying. As stated, however, it is in urgent need of repair and improvement. We're proposing several sustainable, energy-efficient features fit for modern living. The planning delay is causing us considerable stress, and we do not relish entering a lengthy and costly appeals process to achieve what we consider to be a modest and sympathetic update to our decrepit home. With extended delay, the combined effects of inflation, erosion, and material cost rises may mean the project becomes unaffordable for us. Far from being severely detrimental to the streetscape, it is our belief that our proposed improvements will enhance the street scene with a carefully considered, well-constructed, and interesting addition to the Broadstairs housing stock. We hope that the committee will agree and see fit to approve our plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I will ask now the planning officer, which is, Emma, to outline the application.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the application site here, outlined in red, so number 45 Stanley Road. You can see it's a detached property. You can see Radley Close over on the right-hand side here. You can see the quite large plots with quite deep gardens. And this is the application property. So it's an existing chalet-style bungalows. You can see there's already accommodation at first floor level with an existing dormer to the centre of the roof. There's a garage to the front of the property that's projecting forward. And you can see this is the garage again on the slide here. You can see the barn hip roof to the existing building. This is the neighbouring property to the left. It also has a garage projection. And this is just the view again of the application property on the left-hand side here. So you can see the neighbouring property is also of similar style with a barn hip roof and what appears to be accommodation again at roof level. And then a further away view again, so you can see the property in the middle here with properties either side. So you can see in terms of the palette of material, it's mainly red brick with clay tiles, although you can see some white render as well on the property to the left here. And then a further view. So again, the predominant form of dwellings in this road are bungalows, but mainly chalet-style bungalows with the accommodation at roof level. So there's a variety of different dormers, but you can see here they're usually quite modest in size within the roof slope. This again is the application property on the left here, and again you can see the neighbour on the right-hand side. So again, similar roof form. and this is the right-hand side of the application property. So this is their existing garage. So this is the neighbouring property on the right, and you see their side window here. So this is just useful to note because there's a proposed carport going in this location here. This is just showing again properties within the road. So you can see again the majority of the road is bungalows, and again opposite the site, the style of properties. And this is now into the rear garden of the application property. So the application property is on the right hand side here, looking towards the neighbour. You can see again there's rear dormers in both the properties, and this here is a rear projecting the rear projection of the existing garage on the site. So the proposal is for an extension of this garage. This is in the neighbour's property looking back towards the application site. So this is the application site here. So this is just to show the nearest neighbouring windows. So this is the boundary that you just saw the existing garage adjacent to. So the proposal is to extend that 2 metres further. So this is just showing the relationship with the neighbouring property. You can see the existing windows to serve a dining room in this location here. And then this is back inside the application property. So you can see the existing conservatory, which is remaining. And this is inside looking towards the neighbouring property here from the conservatory. And this is along their side boundary. So now this is with the other neighbouring property who are on the left-hand side. And there's this existing structure adjacent to the boundary to the rear of the existing garage. And again, just the view. So this is the neighbour. This is the existing forward projecting garage that you saw at the site, and then this is to the rear of this. So the proposal includes enclosing this area here. And then again, further back again, so the proposal will involve a projection of a single storey in this level here. So this is the proposed block plan. So the proposal is to provide a single storey extension in this location here, and to extend the garage in this location here, and to provide a carport at the front of the site. And at roof level, it's to provide an enlarged dormer to the front and at the rear, and to gable the ends of the building. So this is the existing front elevation of the building, as you saw from the photos. So you can see again the existing barn hip roof form, the central dormer, and the forward garage projection. And again on the right hand side, the other garage, which is currently set back behind the front elevation. And this is the proposal. So the proposal involves on the right hand side a carport, which will be an open carport. Through this application, there have been a number of amendments that have been received. So the amendments have included the carport on the right hand side being set back, so it's in line with the neighbouring property. So there's now no concerns with this carport in terms of its location. On the left-hand side, the existing garage that you saw with the pitched roof is being removed and it's being replaced with a flat roof. And then behind the garage, so this, you can see there's a lower roof here, which is the existing garage, and then behind that an extension is being built with a higher parapet roof. Then at roof level, the central dormer is being removed and it's being replaced with this wider dormer that extends fully to the left-hand side of the building. And then you can see an additional extension being added above the roof with additional windows in it. So there's not actually any accommodation at this level. This is just being added onto the property to provide additional light into the first floor level. And you can see in terms of the actual general appearance as well, the materials of the building are changing. So again, this has been amended throughout the application, but the currently proposed materials include grey timber cladding, black charred timber cladding, black framed aluminium windows, and red clay tiles. So this is the existing rear elevation. So again, you can see the current rear elevation has a central dormer as well, and you can see the conservatory, the garage that extends up to the boundary, and the sort of the lean-to on the side here. And this is now the proposal. So the proposal involves these 2 dormer windows being added at the rear. Again, you can see the raised element at roof level here. In this location here is an extension to the rear of the garage, so a 2-metre extension on the boundary with the neighbour. And again, in this location here, set further back from the rear because it doesn't come fully out to the rear elevation. This is the extension behind the existing front garage. So this is now the west-facing elevation. So this was from the neighbouring side where I showed you a photo from inside their garden looking towards the neighbouring property. So this is the proposed elevation here. So you can see the roof has gone from a barn hip to a gable end. You can see the dormer windows and their profile at the front and at the back there. This is the projecting carport. So this front elevation here of this carport is in line with the neighbouring front elevation. And then there's now a 2-metre extension behind the existing garage in this location here. In terms of the garage in this location, so it's not coming any further forward than the existing garage, but as you can see, again, the flat roof that's been removed, the pitch roof was being removed, replaced with the flat roof, and again, you can see the cladding changes. And then this is the other side elevation as existing, and this is now that elevation as proposed. So one of the concerns really with this elevation is with both of the dormers being added at first floor level, that they're not centrally located, they're both up against this side wall, so there would be no break in the roof form, so you don't see the sort of the edge of the pitched roof, you just see this side elevation, so creating a 2-storey element in this location here. As was mentioned, there has been a prior approval that was submitted for this site for an additional floor being added, which is a system that falls outside actual planning permission that we can assess, but is actually a form of permitted development rights, and that was approved. So the dotted line is showing what was previously allowed through the prior notification process. The concern with this, though, is not necessarily the actual height of the building. The concern is with the overall form of the development, the design of the element, and this additional roof form being added at the top level to create the appearance of what has appearance of a 3-storey building. So this is the section through the building, and again, just another view showing that section. So similar, and then we go on to the floor plans. So this is the existing floor plans. So again, you can see the existing floor with the garage on the right-hand side, the forward projecting garage here, and the conservatory at the rear. And this is now the proposal. So this is the extension in this location here, behind the existing garage. That's the extension that has the raised parapet roof. Then to the rear on this side is another 2-metre deep extension behind the existing garage. Here is the carport. And then this is the existing first floor plan. So again, because they have an existing dormer to the front and rear, this accommodation is already created at first floor level. But this is the proposed as a result of the change in the dormers. So the dormer is located on the left-hand side of the front roof slope, and to the rear, again, there's a dormer in this location and this location, both projecting out. So there's no concerns with the principle of a dormer. As you can see, the existing property has a dormer. There's other properties in the street that have a dormer, so we have no concerns with the accommodation at first floor level. And again, the prior notification has already approved a 2-storey building. So the concern is with the design, the use of the materials, and the overall appearance of the building. So with this additional floor being added, this has windows located within it, and as mentioned, this then creates the appearance of what appears like a 3-storey building in a road that is full of bungalows, chalet-style bungalows, so it will appear much larger in scale than the other properties. And with the dormer window, again, it's not, whereas existing dormer windows within the street are quite small and modest in size, centrally located within the building, this is quite a large-scale dormer. It's located on the left-hand side rather than centrally, so it's quite unbalanced on the building. And the use of the black cladding throughout the building and the grey cladding is considered to be a material that's not in keeping with the existing palette of material in the surrounding area. So there's no concerns with the garage extension in this location here in terms of the impact on the neighbour, whilst it does come out the additional 2 metres. As you saw from that photo, it's not considered that would have a significant impact on neighbouring lights, given the boundary treatment that's there and what's present in the neighbouring garden that screens the extension. In terms of the extension on this side as well, this is the neighbour's garage, so there's a 3.5 metre gap between the proposal and the side window of the neighbouring property, but the majority of their habitable room windows are at the rear, and this doesn't project beyond there. So again, the actual extension itself is not considered to impact on the neighbours' living conditions, and even the gabling of the roof this is considered to be adequate distance from neighbouring windows to not result in any unacceptable impact. But the concern is with this design and the fact it will, through the dormers and the additional roof element, appear out of character with the area, and therefore it's recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Emma, I move the officer's recommendation. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. Members? Councillor Garner.
Yeah, I'll go first then.
Beg your pardon.
That's all right. No, I'm struggling more with this one than the previous one in terms of agreeing that this should be refused. At previous planning committee meetings, I've been quite keen to preserve areas that have a predominance of bungalows, a bungalow estate that I've been quite keen to protect. But this has been I think there's been a slight, no, I won't say misinformation, but a slight difference about Stanley Road that I think isn't fully understood. Stanley Road isn't a road of bungalows. It's quite a long road with some quite large houses. This one, so I am quite familiar with Stanley Road, this one is sort of on the edge of where the houses come up to and then the bungalows start. So I think it's a bit unfair to say that this is changing the character of the area, and especially as there is already permission, as I understand it, for a development here that would actually be larger than what this development is, higher than what this development is. So, and I think one of the things that is in its favour as well, I think Councillor Alban mentioned, and when we were discussing the previous proposal, that the style and design is in the eye of the beholder, and what might, I know it's Councillor Saunders, sorry, I always get the two of you mixed up, is in the eye of the beholder, and what one day might not be right, is something that is going to change. And I quite like this design and the look of this, and I think it would be a shame to refuse permission for it. So that's my contribution for now.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Crittenden.
Well, I'm pleased to hear from Councillor Garner about the street scene, because actually that was one of the things that I was going to ask, but you've kind of already answered that. I think my first reaction when I saw the bit on top was like, ugh. But the more you've shown me pictures of it, the more it's grown on me. And actually, I do quite like it. I think as long as it doesn't detract hugely from the street scene, I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Well, these things are very much in the eye of the beholder. I have to say I agree with the planning officers. I think it's unbalanced. I think perhaps that drawing doesn't do it any favours in terms of trying to understand the building. But it looks distinctly odd to me, and therefore I'm inclined to the view that it would be incongruous in this street scene or any street scene. I think I support the recommendation to refuse it on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I really don't like it. It is totally out of keeping with a house. It looks more like an industrial unit. But one thing that is missing for me is there's no mention of things like a water table, what kind of energy is going to be used. When you do a development like this, it's a perfect opportunity to put the all singing, all dancing, climate-friendly facilities in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I feel that we shouldn't be looking at what we like. I don't think it's just about what we like. It is subjective. I think we have to consider whether, from a planning point of view, this is acceptable. And it is different, but that can't be denied. But as pointed out by Councillor Garner and Councillor Crittenden, the street scene is not all about bungalows, and so I really think it's quite harsh to refuse this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dave Saunders.
Thank you, Chairman. I too know Stanley Road, and the particular, and it's absolutely right that this chalet bungalow is on the fringe of the area that is predominantly bungalows, and directly opposite, the estate directly opposite starts with bungalows. Members will know from the past when I've been on this committee, I do like a bit of symmetry, and I do agree with Councillor Everett that when I'm looking at that elevation, there's no symmetry with the ridge line, and quite honestly, you might as well have that dormer the full width of the rear elevation. So I agree with the planning officer. I don't actually like the sort of third story lookout on the top there, and knowing that area of Stanley Road, knowing what's adjacent to it with the Dutch style roof, etc. I do believe it's a nice architectural design on a prime site. This isn't a prime site, it's a large residential area, and I do agree with the planning officer's recommendation that it will be out of character. Sadly, I think on another site it's absolutely superb, but where it is and where it's being planned, I agree with the planning officer, it will be out of sight, so I'll be supporting the recommendation for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. It is a Marmite. I live in a chalet bungalow, if you want to call it, and it is very difficult sometimes to have enough room in a roof to actually put what you want into a roof. So I have sympathy with the people who are actually putting their application in, because I have small dormers in the front of mine. I do know the road, and I think Mr. Garner's quite correct. Councillor Garner's quite correct. We shouldn't be judging these on taste, whether we like it or whether we don't. And that is what I think some of us tonight are trying to decide. At the end of the day, does this have a merit in its place? I think it should, but I can't really say we should refuse it just because it doesn't look right. I mean, not being funny, I think we have to be forward-thinking. I think we have to actually make sure that we're making houses that are fit and useful for today's market. And by changing the use of this building to one that is practical and fit for purpose, then I think that's what we should be doing, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wing.
I'd just like to say I think that the applicant did say that they were putting energy saving stuff in, if I heard right, and that it was going to be made more eco-friendly, which is good to hear. I also like the fact the garden isn't going to be touched, so there's no overdevelopment in terms of sprawl out into what is clearly a beautiful garden and a haven for wildlife. I can drive down Dumpton Park Drive, for example, and see buildings like this that have appeared between very traditional looking buildings, and maybe the disadvantage this proposal's got is it is the first one on the street. I think we're all of a certain age, and I think maybe we need to start looking to approve things that maybe are a bit more modern looking. They might be out of keeping slightly with the bungalows and the houses around them, which are all very, it appears, of an individual design. So in that respect, it fits into the street because every house seems to be specifically designed. There doesn't seem to be a set pattern of housing. So I will be voting against refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. A little bit concerned about a certain age, but are there any other members wish to speak? Okay, I'm going to put this once again to you. The application is for refusal. Those in favour of that recommendation, please show. Those against? That motion is lost. So I'm going to turn to the officer once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So it's, as always, if a motion for refusal falls, with a motion being put forward against officer recommendation, it has to be given as a ground for why it's being approved. I think from the discussion it's very clear that members actually think that this wouldn't appear out of character, or certainly wouldn't cause harm to the character and appearance of the area, those that support it. And so if a motion is to be put forward for approval, it would be on the grounds that it wouldn't harm the character of the area. I'm just looking at my colleague to wonder whether or not there would be any other conditions that we would recommend. Materials? It's pretty clear, isn't it? I think given the nature of the plans and the detail we've got, we wouldn't recommend any other conditions for it.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Garner.
I'm happy to propose what Mr Livingstone has just suggested proposing.
Thank you.
Need a second.
Yep. A seconder, please. There's several hands. I go with Councillor Wing. And it's to approve. Are those in favour? Thank you. We'll see who's against. All right, that's carried. Thank you. Thank you for that, members. Thank you, members. Moving on to agenda item 40. Sorry? Not saying a word. Right, agenda item 4D, which is land adjacent to 1214 Fort Road. Speaking in favour of the application is Mr Miles. Mr Miles. You have 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, members, and thank you for allowing me to speak on this item. It's been interesting to observe the other applications that you've dealt with tonight, and I'll comment on those perhaps a bit later. I trust those of you that had the opportunity to look at the information I forwarded to you today. It might have been a lot of it, but it was all particularly relevant. Now, as you all have read, this application relates to a proposed change from approved wooden windows to heritage UPVC in a new build development. Now, I'd like to stress that heritage UPVC is very similar, almost indistinguishable from heritage type wooden windows. The advantage of those is manifold, and we're trying with this development to be as eco-friendly as possible. We've got roof PV panels, we've got EV chargers, it's ready, future-proofed for changing to heat pumps, etc., etc. And one of the things that's stalling or rather causing a problem with that procedure is the wooden windows, because we're very close to the seafront. And believe me, the weather in that vicinity can be absolutely evil. And if you look around generally, the properties with wooden windows, which are in the minority, they're not in good condition because they need constant maintenance, constant painting, because of the situation and because of the weather. Now, the other reasons are for the change to UPVC is that the thermal ratings are far better, which means there's going to be less greenhouse emissions, etc., etc., as everybody sort of is striving for these days, and considerably increased sustainability, because the heritage UPVC, and that mustn't be confused with modern UPVC, which I think is awful, and it will last for many, many more years than wood will. It will look smart. It will mean you won't get lots of different colours being introduced. It will be uniform. It will stay there, and it will look smart throughout. Now, my problem is I didn't just go ahead to fit UPVC in accordance with permitted development rights, which the site does benefit from, subject to. But I sought an agreement with the planning department. And I inquired if it would be in order to fit these under permitted development now, this is the heritage UPVC, instead of the approved wood. And I was informed if I wanted to fit the heritage UPVC, I could indeed do so under permitted development. But firstly, I had to fit the permitted wooden windows, and then I could remove them, and then I could put the the UPVC heritage windows as we wanted to do. I won't comment on that. I think probably most people have a view. Now, the proposed heritage style UPV windows and doors are identical to wooden. There's very few heritage windows left in the vicinity. There's modern UPVC absolutely everywhere, and that has changed the character of the conservation area. Could I just add, Mr. Chairman, that the application that you dealt with for Belgrove Road and
Mr. Miles, I have to stop you
2
there.
seconds.
No,
2
no, I'm
seconds?
sorry. You've had your 3 minutes.
That had aluminium windows, sir.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
We're talking about this application now. Thank you. Ian, I believe you're going to do this one.
Thank you. Put the microphone on. So the proposal is to vary the plan condition on a previous application for 3 dwellings to allow windows to be UPVC when they'd previously been approved as timber. So aerial image of where the site is. It's the cleared site in the middle here. So you've got the Fort Road Hotel. You can see the Turner there as well. So this is the plan of the development that was approved under the 2020 permission for 3 dwellings. So this is part of a wider development which we'll look at and see the status on site at the moment. So these are the approved plans. Some of you may have been on planning committees previously when this originally came before. I'm looking around and thinking some of you might have been. So this is the design of the 3 buildings on the corner, the sort of the turn where it has the Cobb's Place elevation. So you can see that the materials are actually annotated on this. So you've got slate roof, stock facing brickwork to the upper floors, render on the ground floor, and you've got very traditional style and pattern of fenestration and indeed the design of the whole building. This is the rear elevation, so it's actually sort of 3-storey at the back of these buildings. So these windows are less visible in the conservation area. They are partly visible from Alkali Row, but obviously you've got a slightly different design of sort of the top floor at the rear. So this is the site at the moment. So you can see these are the 3 units that are on the corner here. You can see the rest of the row being constructed along the left-hand side, and you can see the Fort Road Hotel at the top of the image on the left there. So just to quickly go around with some Google Street View images of just the immediate vicinity of the site. So this is the sort of almost opposite corner where you can see there's a modern infill that was built a few years ago. There you've got, sort of, again, different pattern of development, but obviously some dwellings that are there that are more traditionally designed and obviously historic in terms of how long they've been there. You've then got this late 80s development that's directly opposite the row that's there, that's obviously UPVC windows, very sort of Richard Rogers style that was obviously in vogue at that period of time. And then you've got the row that's further up, which is directly opposite the row that we're not looking at today, which runs up towards the Fort Road Hotel. So you can see again the sort of style and pattern of both fenestration, but also the design more broadly in that row. So as the applicants mentioned, the proposal would look to put in heritage style UPVC windows. So the proposal would aim to match the opening style of those windows. So as we were looking at, if I go to this one, you can see you've got 3 casement windows if you're looking at the front elevation, 3 casement windows at the top floor, and then you've got sliding sash windows at first and ground floor. So the proposal would have the same form of openings, but obviously would be with a UPVC product made to appear similar in appearance to timber windows. Obviously, the information that we've been provided with includes this detail in terms of the specification, which allows for inclusion of things like the horns, internal and external bars, and there are obviously a variety of products on the market for this. Officers raised concerns about the UPVC in conservation areas. Obviously, there is it does very much depend on the form of the development at the moment. If you've got obviously timber windows at the moment, and the proposal is to put UPVC in. It depends very much on the style of timber windows that you've got, how old they are, and there is obviously a hierarchy that's looked at in historic England terms of when you would allow potentially non-traditional materials in buildings. This is a new build development. It obviously was proposed with timber windows, double glazed timber windows, as well as the other traditional materials of slate, brick, render that you've got there. And so it's our view that to have a traditional material to match the traditional design and the rest of the materials is quite important, especially in a new development in a conservation area, which is quite a prominent location within the Margate Old Town. And given the proximity that we've seen from the photographs, we do think that, being on the footpath or in that area, that whilst imitation windows are getting better, there's no doubt, as things go on, that it would still be perceivable in terms of the grain that you get from the wood, even if the style of windows is getting better in terms of the frame widths are now coming down for UPVC heritage products. In addition, officers consider this specifically engages with paragraph 135 of the MPPF, and specifically that's that local planning authority should seek to ensure that the quality of approved development is not materially diminished between permission and completion as a result of changes being made to the permitted scheme. And the example specifically cited in the MPPF is through changes to approved details such as the materials used. And we do think that paragraph is directly applicable to this application, and therefore the recommendation is to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. I recommend the officer's recommendation is adopted. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Orban.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the first thing that came to my mind was why accept the approval for having wooden windows when you got your application, and then decide to change it? Why not put those, show that the windows that they want now in the application? That was just one thought. You could say that they accepted the wooden windows so that they would get consent and then come in as they have done for a change. And I accept what the applicant has said in relation to you could put wooden windows in and then take them out and put what he wants in afterwards. But I think we're dealing with a bigger issue than that. I have said in the past that I think obviously even with listed buildings, not just in a conservation area, that we've got to look for modern stuff. I mean, and the applicant's quite right about the wind that comes off the sea, where it's located, etc., etc. But I think we've just got to look at the specifics in relation to the original application was with wooden windows, and so I'd just like to hear what other members have got to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Councillor Wing.
I think it's about consistency, because right in the heart of the conservation area in Ramsgate, in fact, right on the edges of Spencer Square, where you've got listed Georgian properties, a UPVC window has been allowed on the front of a property under permitted development rights. So I think we've got to try and get some control, and I think this is the right way to do it. I think we're now in a situation where the cost of living is so bad that we have to take into account trying to make properties as efficient as possible. I lived in a Grade 2 listed building, and I can tell you, when the wind blows in the wrong direction, you can put on as much heating as you like. And those were, refurbished windows where you tried to reduce the amount. It's just not a pleasant place to live in. And we've got to start thinking that we take some control of this, and it's good to hear that the materials are changing and that they're looking more and more realistic, or more and more realistic as wooden sash do. I cannot see the juxtaposition between that UPVC window that was allowed on Spencer Street that is totally out of keeping, and this, which I think would be a whole building with similar UPVC historical sashed windows that I don't think many people would even notice as they walk past. So.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I know this road very well, actually, believe it or not, because I used to go up there quite a lot. Now, I understand Ian's concerns about the fact you can't see the fact that they're wooden, because you can't see the grain of the wood. However, if you put 7 coats of paint on it, you still won't see the grain of the wood. So, and you would probably need 8 just to keep them from rotting. I do agree with Councillor Wing. I think in an area like this, maybe the applicant was wrong. He should have actually put in plastic windows when he did it, when he put the application in. But I do think a heritage window is the right way to go. It keeps it warm, it keeps it dry, and we are trying to make lives better for people, not worse. And I think if we're going to put in a wooden frame window, all we're doing is just harking back to the olden days where windows you had to have secondary glazing to stop them getting cold. And I think, you know, we are trying to make a better place for people to live. And I think if we go for a heritage window, not a cheap old plastic window, but a decent quality heritage window, then maybe that will make the people's lives who live there better. And to be honest with you, Chair, I can't agree to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roseski.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Actually, Councillor Hart said most of what I wanted to say about the heritage windows and the fact that you can't actually tell the difference between that and wood when they're up there. Looking at the building across the road, having UPVC, slightly cheaper looking windows in there, that was allowed. Again, we should be consistent that if in an area buildings, new builds are allowed to have UPVC or a form of UPVC, then it should be allowed for all of them. Therefore, I will be agreeing with Councillor Hart there and saying no, I can't agree with the refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crington.
Thank you. Again, really picking up from Councillor Wing and Councillor Hart, one of the things that would concern me with wooden windows is the long-term maintenance, and you know, I'm battling with some wooden windows at the moment, and it doesn't, once they start to go and look tatty, then they look absolutely awful. And I do think that we should be looking at longer term maintenance as well as the immediate warmth and everything else. And so I'm inclined to, again, go against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Alban, you wish to come back?
Yes, please, Chair. I think members need to look at what they're saying in relation to existing houses within a conservation area. You can change the windows without consent. You can put UPVC in without consent unless it's listed. So if you're looking at an old building, and I'm just referring to what Councillor Wing said, it's an existing building, and they put it's not listed within a conservation area, you can put UPVC windows in. This is a new build, and I think that's the difference. I'm not arguing for the sake that obviously we need, as I said earlier, that we need to look further in relation to how we address listed buildings and properties in conservation areas. But I just find it odd that you accept a planning application with wooden windows and then come in later to, obviously you must have thought about it before. Well, I certainly would. So I just wanted to make that clarification, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. If I may, I believe it's Councillor Ratton is putting his hand up. I'm afraid, Councillor Ratton, you can't speak.
I've actually I've spoken to Nick Hughes this afternoon and agreed.
I've got no, I've got no, and I don't think the officers have either.
You'd have to speak at the 20
Yeah, I can't allow you to speak now because debate has started. I'm sorry. Any other members wish to speak? Okay, thank you. The recommendation is for refusal. It's the officer's recommendation. Those in favour of that refusal, please show. Those against? Right. That has fallen. I turn to Mr. Livingston once again.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of members have obviously expressed that they consider that for this new development, UPVC heritage style is acceptable. In terms of the report, what it outlines is that this is a variation of condition, but what it actually entails is granting a brand new planning permission for this development. And as you'll see from looking at the section which talks about the SAMS contribution on this development for the 3 houses has yet to be paid. And now what that means is that we need to ensure that if members are deferring delegating for approval or just looking to approve it, that it has to either have a new legal agreement linked to this planning permission to secure the SAMS, or indeed the previous obligation on the 2020 application is discharged via payment before we issue the decision for us to be in accordance with the habitat regs. Now, in addition to that, obviously I've shown members the extent of the information that we've got about the precise nature of the windows. Obviously, it would be our recommendation, but members don't necessarily need to take this on, would be for us to get the precise details of the actual drawing of the windows to be put in to ensure that they match the design of the development that's been approved. But I leave it to members to determine which motion they want to put forward.
Thank you, Ian. Right, Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding by that was that, correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, is that for us to agree, or for you to now agree for the heritage windows to go in, get the developer to pay the SAMS first, and then agree the windows with, as long as they are matching what you think they should match. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, so there is a bit of an either or here, because this is one of the situations where if the SAM is discharged on the old application, then we could issue the decision on the basis of the development, but then alternatively it could be a new legal agreement or obligation on the basis of this new one. In terms of the details of the windows, the option would be that it's deferred to officers to get that information before grant, or alternatively, this is within the gift because this is a change to the application. Members could impose a condition to require those details prior to installation. Installation. The reality is, though, I think as you've seen from the photo, there are openings, the windows are going to go in, so it kind of makes sense to probably agree it before issuing a decision, because that's probably that's quicker, basically. So if I was to read out what it might entail as a motion, it would be to defer and delegate for approval subject to either a legal agreement securing the SAMS contribution or discharge of the obligation via payment under F/TH/20 with the submission of precise details of the windows to be installed, to be submitted.
Is that understood by members?
So is Councillor Hart agreeing with
that? Councillor Hart?
Yeah, happy with that, Chair, thank you.
Seconder.
Okay, can I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you. It's Councillor Saunders, Dave Saunders.
Straight to the vote.
Do members agree?
We need to vote on that.
So a show of hands, please, if you would. Those against?
I was in favour of that.
Right. No, I know it's getting late. Councillor Keane, Councillor Orban's always lost his football. We have one abstain, that's Councillor Orban. That is carried. Thank you, members. Thank you. Okay, ready to move on? Moving on to item 4E, which is Gore End Farm, Minnis Road in Birchington. Speaking in favour of this application is Mr. Wooten. Mr. Wooten? I'm sorry we've kept you a long time tonight. But,
I've only got to drive back to Cambridge, so don't worry. And the M25 shut the crossing tonight as well.
To see the sympathy you get here, don't you really? You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the opportunity to address the committee on behalf of the applicant. My name is John Wotton. I'm a director of the firm of Savills, and I'm the agent to the applicant. As the officer's report states, this application relates to an allocated site in the Thanet local plan. Furthermore, Thanet District Council does not currently have a 5-year housing supply, and as such, a presumption in favour of sustainable development applies. Therefore, the principle of housing development of this site has already been established. Planning permission is sought for the erection of 4 dwellings, the conversion and extension of a listed barn, and the conversion of a curtilage listed barn. The site has been designed to reinstate the historic farmyard site layout, placing particular emphasis on the listed barn, which will form a central focus point for the development. The development is low density with large open spaces, with landscaping to the south and northwest of the site. This design will preserve and enhance the heritage value of the site whilst mitigating any impact upon neighbouring properties. A listed building consent application has already been approved for this scheme, and Thanet's Conservation Officer has noted that the scheme will ensure that the buildings are protected from falling into disrepair and that limited alterations are required to facilitate the conversions. The NPPF states that a development should only be refused on highways grounds where the proposal would create an unacceptable impact on highway safety or where the impact on the road network would be severe. A specialist highways consultant has completed a road safety audit for this scheme and has concluded that the proposal will not have any detrimental effect upon either highway safety or on the road network. The Highways Authority have raised no objections, and there are no objections from any other statutory consultees. In conclusion, we endorse the officer's recommendation of approval for this scheme as it complies with all the relevant national and local plan policies, and it will help to protect important designated heritage assets whilst delivering much needed housing provision. We trust members will be able to approve the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wotton. Speaking against the application, that's under 20.1 is Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. I've read through the report that accompanies this planning application, and I would like to highlight some of the issues that it fails to raise. The location of the proposal sits on the very edge of the village, overlooking the fields. The report suggests that the site is in the centre of an urban environment, whereas a better description would be a rural-urban fringe, which is defined as a landscape interface between town or village and countryside. This site has a lot of significant historical aspects. In early times, Gore End was a small port. There have been prehistoric, Roman and medieval remains found in the area between 1272 and 1307 was a non-corporate limb of the Port of Dover, which unfortunately are downplayed in the report. I worry that the reliance on SUDs to deal with the surface water is unwise. I have driven down under the railway bridge on many occasions to see how badly flooded Minnis Road gets following even very moderate rain. Many attempts have been made over the years to address this, but unfortunately none have succeeded. The report inaccurately states that there is a definite ownership separation between the site and the wider strategic development. St John's College, Cambridge, is listed in the applicant details on both applications that have been put forward to this council, and it is common knowledge that they own all the farmland in question. I'm also concerned what the impact may be on the increase in traffic in this area by having a third sequence of traffic light. Minnis Road is the main route down into Minnis Bay, a beach that is loved by many residents across Birchington and Thanet, but also by many tourists that come down. Minnis Road is already a road that struggles to cope with queues of traffic during peak season due to the current two-way traffic light sequence. And there is not really an alternative route. The only other route that is close by would take vehicles over the very narrow bridge on Station Approach, which would simply cause more problems and issues. In conclusion, The development would effectively erase all trace of the early history of Gore End, now Minnis Bay, whilst failing to provide any material benefit to the local community. The detrimental impact on residents, the local views and landscape, localised flooding under the railway bridge and access to Minnis Bay far outweigh any benefit such a small number of houses, unaffordable to most people in the area, would have, and I ask the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cupp. Also have speaking under 20.1 is Councillor Fellows.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I'm here as Ward Councillor to voice my opposition to the proposed development of Gore End Farm. The reasons for my objection are multifold and include concerns about highway safety and congestion, impact on the heritage character and appearance of the area, destruction of local wildlife, loss of privacy for the owners of the adjacent Grade 2 listed adjoining Gore End farmhouse. First, let me address the issue of highway safety and congestion. The addition of a third traffic light sequence in the area will not only significantly increase traffic, but indeed cause even greater congestion along Minnis Road, especially during the peak summer period, when it can already take more than 15 minutes to get from the bottom of Bircherton High Street through to the traffic lights towards Minnis Bay. The resident of Gore End farmhouse over the past 2 years has observed that the current third traffic light situated in the proposed development has only been activated when a vehicle leaves the site. During these 2 years, he has only seen this light activated twice. However, the proposed development would result in a minimum of 7 cars, more likely to be in excess of 14 cars, not to mention other vehicles coming and going throughout the course of the day. The planning proposal illustrates a trip generation assessment which shows an additional 3 cars during the morning peak hours between 8 and 9 a.m. However, as highlighted earlier, the number is significantly higher, given that the planning proposal shows car parking spaces for 15 cars, which doesn't account for any visitor spaces which we know there will be. During peak rush hour, it is reasonable to assume that most cars will come and go, potentially resulting in 1 car leaving every 4 minutes during the hours of 8 and 9 a.m. and 5 to 6 p.m. timeframes. This increased traffic flow will not only result in longer wait times for local residents and emergency services that use the Minnis Road route as the main access point to Minnis Bay. Not only will this result in increased air and noise pollution from waiting cars, but it will also make it harder for emergency vehicles to navigate throughout this area, putting residents' safety at risk. Additionally, the congestion will have a negative impact on the quality of life for those who live near this development along both sides of Minnis Road. I must also point out the number of near misses and accidents that have been witnessed under the bridge involving vehicles, cyclists and pedestrians. This too will be increased, especially when refuse or large vehicles are trying to exit the development. As the proposed access and visibility layout, it appears that a 13-metre refuse truck will need to mount curbs to safely clear the exit. The point where the truck would mount the curb is directly on the proposed pedestrian crossing and the pedestrian entrance to the development. It is also noted that when exiting the development by vehicle, you are completely blind to oncoming traffic in both directions. Next, I would like to address the impact of this development would have on the heritage character, appearance, local views and landscape setting of the area. Gore End Farm has a rich archaeological history dating back to at least the 16th century and a unique farmland character that sets it apart from other areas of Thanet. The proposed development would completely wipe out the history of Gore End Farm and destroy the farmstead character that makes it so special. 2 of my residents have worked so hard to protect the character of Gore End Farmhouse by lovingly and sensitively restoring the beautiful Grade 2 listed house to its former glory and original proposed use. TDC throughout their report... Can I continue, Chair? TDC throughout their report refer to the importance placed on safeguarding and the architectural and historical importance of the listed building and its setting, yet you are potentially approving a development which would result in exactly the opposite. Throughout agreeing to overtly domesticate this existing farmstead would result in a significant loss of historic character that cannot be undone. Although it's not necessarily grounds for refusal, I think it's worth highlighting that there has been several offers and attempts with St John's College to purchase this land and at or above the market value in order to protect, repair and bring back the use of this land and buildings for its original intended use as a farm. The proposal would reincorporate the Gore End Farmhouse and Gore End Farm as one complex, protecting and enhancing both the architecture, landscape and historic...
Can I ask you to wind up, Councillor Fellows?
I've got plenty more to say, Chair.
No, I can't. You know the rules.
Okay, in conclusion, I oppose the proposed development of Gore End Farmhouse for several reasons. Firstly, the addition of the third traffic light sequence. Secondly, development would destroy the heritage character of unique farm character in an area, cause it to be over-domestically in nature and as a result to lose the rich archaeological history dating back to at least the 16th century. So I urge members of the committee to strongly consider the impact of this proposed development carefully and to make a
Thank
decision
you.
that prioritises the well-being of
Councillor
local
Fellows.
residents and the preservation of the unique character and history of this area. Thank you,
Councillor
members.
Fellows, thank you. Thank you. I'm sure you could. Thank you. I'm going to ask the planning officer, which is Annabelle, on this occasion, please, to give the report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is the application site outlined in red. We have Minnis Road across the top here. Gore Rd farmhouse is to the east here, and it's not within the application site. There are areas outlined in blue here which are land within the applicant's ownership but not within the application site. So this is an aerial view of the site, Minnis Road here, Gore Rd farmhouse here, and the application site is in this location here. So the application is for residential development for a total of 7 dwellings, which includes conversions and also new build development itself. So the site is actually a mix of previously developed and non-previously developed land, and which has been seen from the previous slide. So this building here is the threshing barn that's been referred to. It's Grade 2 listed, and this building here is a cow shed that is curtilage listed. So, and as has been mentioned, it is part of the wider strategic allocation for the Birchington site. But it is considered a self-contained site in its own right, and it's not considered that its development coming forward of the larger strategic allocation would prejudice that application coming forward in any way. So just looking at some photographs of the site, this is taken from Minnis Road. So you can see the farmhouse there with its access, the cow shed to the right of that photo. This is looking at the existing access into the site, and you can see the railway bridge and going across there. So this is into the site, and we're looking at the side of the threshing barn, which, as I've mentioned, is Grade 2 listed in its own right. We're looking to the western boundary of the site. You can see the mast that was adjoining the site. It's not within the application site, but this area on this part of the site is, part of the photo is. We're looking at the upper side and rear of the site, so the sort of overgrown or more overgrown area is the application site. You're looking to the farmland to the rear of the site is not within it, the application site, and that's looking to the eastern boundary of the site. This is looking towards Gore Rd farmhouse, so that is out with the application site, and there's the properties opposite on Minnis Road, and Minnis Road sits to the front there. And we're looking back where we started, so we've got the traffic lights on Minnis Road there, the farmhouse here, and the cow shed there. Excuse me. So, as has been mentioned, we are looking at we are looking at 7 dwellings, and I'll take you through the various plots. So plot 1 is here, and we'll look at that. So this is the cow shed and the existing elevations of that building. So this is how the northern elevation, so looking towards from Minnis Road, would look. So you have the existing cow shed, and this is actually a new building that's adjoining it. This is a southern elevation, so again this is the existing cow shed here. And then we have the western elevation of the cow shed, and indeed the eastern elevation of the same building. You will note this is the building that is closest in proximity, the farmhouse that's been referenced. The building is single storey, and it actually as we've seen from the site plan, sits forward of the main farmhouse. So it would look out onto the sort of front garden area of the farmhouse rather than impacting on any private space for the farmhouse as such. These are the floor plans of the farmhouse. So you see the bedroom spaces are mainly in this location here. So that's the new bit that's added to it. And this is existing the existing cow shed where the main living area for that property would be. And there are the two openings there. The farmhouse sits back here, if you were to look at it on site. And that's just the roof plan of it. You'll note there's a building here that is actually a cycle and bin store, so we'll just have a quick look at those elevations. So we've got a cycle store and bin store here, a carport, and that's the edge of plot 1. And that's what you'd see looking from Minnis Road of that building over the wall, and just looking at the floor plans, so the bin store here, a cycle store, and a carport. So looking onto plot 2 and 3, these are the ones that are within the converted threshing barn with a small extension to make plot 3. So this is some sections of the existing threshing barn, just to give you an idea of its size and scale as it stands now. So this is a threshing barn. This is its western elevation, so that would be looking out towards the tunnel, the railway tunnel, essentially. This is the north elevation of the threshing barn. This is the eastern elevation, so looking towards the farmhouse, and you can see the single-storey extension that we've looked at here. And this is the south elevation. As you can see, the materials proposed are traditional and the sort of thing you would find on a farmyard, and they take cues from the existing materials within the vicinity on the extension, but also reusing and fixing and the threshing barn itself to ensure that that is kept and maintained. So this is the ground floor of the units. So this is unit 2 here, and this is unit 3, and that's the small single-storey extension we looked at. And this is the first floor plan, so unit 2 here, unit 3, and as has been mentioned, that's only a single-storey extension to the threshing barn, so it keeps its main shape as being a long, traditional barn shape. So we're looking at plots 4, 5 and 6, and they are new buildings, and they'll be in a terrace in this area here. So this is the northern elevation of the barns that would be facing onto Minnis Road, but they are obviously set far back into the site, so you wouldn't get an immediate view of them from Minnis Road. That's the south elevation. So, and excuse me, the flank elevation, so you're looking at plot 6 here, which is the most eastern building in that terrace. And this is plot 4, which is on the western side of that terrace. Again, they are looking to utilise traditional materials, in this instance cladding, to try and tie it into the buildings already on site and the historic sort of notion of having a farmyard development on the site. So we have the ground floors of the properties here, the first floors of the site and the roof plan. So the last building to look at is plot 7. Again, a new build development, and it's quite an interesting building. As you can see, it's mainly single storey, of a 2-storey element here. And that's its north elevation, that's its south elevation, its eastern elevation and its western elevation. This is the ground floor plan, as you say. It's an interesting shape. And this is the only element of the building that is actually 2-storey, the majority being single-storey. And it's its roof plan. There's landscape. This is the landscape strategy plan. You will note there are areas of landscaping proposed both along where the access sits at the moment, because it's slightly being realigned in this to be to not bend as much and curve round. It will go straight on to the Minnis Road. So there'll be landscaping here where the existing access sits. There's also additional landscaping to the rear of the site here and some landscaping here. There will be some trees that are lost in the development, but they are of low categories, and it is considered with the additional planting and things that will be provided on site together with ecological enhancements in terms of bat boxes and various other habitats that could be created in these landscape wildflower meadow sites, excuse me, that the loss of those trees will be mitigated. Concerns have been raised about highways and the impact of the development on highways, and particularly the fact there will be another set of traffic lights on the site. We're looking at this photograph here. That's the cowshed here, the farmyard there, the farmhouse there, and you note the traffic light there with the car waiting. So there's existing traffic lights, as I'm sure members know, either side of that bridge and tunnel. This is the existing access, and as has been mentioned, it's actually already controlled by traffic lights, so there is a third set already there, and that was used to control farm vehicles coming in and out of the site in any case. So it's going forward, it will be a similar arrangement. The access is moving and becoming more straight on from where it is now and not curving, but it will also still be served by a set of traffic lights, but it is essentially replicating the existing set of traffic lights that already exist. So it would not be a new set, and it would not be a new thing to have traffic lights there. Yes, the farmyard hasn't been used for a number of years, clearly, for farm vehicles coming in and out on a regular basis, but it's not to say that at any time a farmyard couldn't, an agricultural use or a different use couldn't come there and the traffic lights be operated on a regular basis. There has been no objections from highways subject to the traffic lights and the additional conditions we've heard about, or the conditions already set out on the report, and the additional condition that's been recommended to do with the details of the traffic lights that are going to be put in being submitted and agreed with highways. There will also be a pedestrian crossing, and there are pedestrian visibility displays. Mention has been made about whether the access is suitable for refuse vehicles, and tracking diagrams have been provided. Sorry, this is actually excuse me, a plan showing the access as it's been realigned and proposed to be realigned, and the traffic lights would sit here, so they move from their sort of location in this direction here over to this location, but highways raised no objection to it, subject to those details being submitted and agreed with them. And refuse vehicles have been tracked, and larger vehicles have also been tracked, and it has been found that there is potentially a slight issue with vehicles coming and turning right from, so we have a series of tracking diagrams, they may be rather difficult to see because they have a lot of detail on them. There might be a slight overhang when a refuge vehicle turning right, but it is very minor, and there is no reason why a refuge vehicle would, could be built into their route to turn left, and that has been something that's been raised. And even if so, it is on a weekly basis or so that the refuge vehicles would be entering the site. So, sorry, going back to sum up really, it is an application for residential development on an allocated housing site. It will, in officers' opinion, help to preserve and keep the Grade 2 listed barn in its own right, as well as the Curtis listed cowshed. It will provide accommodation and add housing stock of various sizes to the district's housing need, and it will provide green space and biodiversity and net gain. There are also no impact in terms of residential amenity, with safeguarding conditions, drainage is considered acceptable, archaeology impacts. So it is considered that most things are safeguarded by conditions, and the recommendation now, as has been set out by Mr Livingstone, is for members to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. You've heard the recommendation. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Members? Do I have any? Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I have one concern, which is the vehicles turning right, but I think that could be addressed by widening the road, the access out, so I don't think that's a major issue, and I think that could easily be adopted and altered. There's enough room there. And I did speak to the local highways chap today, who explained to me a little bit more about the traffic light system and this, that and the other, and he was very happy with it. I think it's a very imaginative use of the site. I think it's a good use of old barns. I think it's a good use and a nice place to put houses for people to attain to try and get to a place like that. And I think it's a good use of the space. And I have no reason to refuse this at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little bit shocked that the applicant has said that there is no objections from the local people. The parish council have sent their comments in for refusal. The residents' association are up in arms about the development. The officers have obviously never been along Minnis Road during the summer when it is gridlocked. It's literally one car one way, one car another. And I don't think anybody. The cowshed is a very special place, and if the application goes ahead, I think that the exterior should be kept as is now to keep the street scene as it is. That is very important. The other thing is, I'd like to ask the officer, have you located the well?
Well, yes. Do you want to speak? Bear with me, Councillor Wright. Are you aware of the well on the site?
I haven't actually found it myself, but I am aware there is a well on the land.
The person that lives
please,
in
one
the
at a
house
time,
has got the
Councillor
map.
Wright.
Sorry, I didn't.
The owner of the farmhouse has got the map, which shows the well. I'll email when I get my power. I will email it to you.
Thank you, but I don't think
you.
it will have an impact. I understand the land has been surveyed and all those sort of historic features would have been picked up, so I don't think it will hopefully prejudice the layout that we're looking to agree tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I come to this, unlike a number of people here, I'm not overly familiar with this area, so I did do a little bit of research and looked up some pictures of the site and of the buildings, and both Councillors Fellows and Cup have updated us as I've read about some of the history of the site. And when I listened to the agent speaking, I was interested to hear he was saying about how this development would enhance the listed building status of the site and protect the important designated heritage assets. And I sort of thought, it was a shame. It's a shame that St John's College, the owners of the site, haven't thought about doing that over the last few years. Because looking at, even just seeing from the picture shown here, looking at some other, these buildings seem to have been allowed to fall into a state of disrepair, almost as if, you know, it would enhance getting an application like this prepared. So I think it is a shame, and I have had a good read of some of the surveys here, and it's noted in the reptile survey that St John's College, Cambridge, have allowed Network Rail to scrape the majority of the site, I think it's about 18 months ago, to enable to be used as a site compound for works on the railway. And I saw that in the reptile survey, where it was noted that this is a site where there were an abundance of reptiles and other biodiversity on the site that have been previously decimated and are now returning. I think, if I look at this, the ecology survey was 18 months old on the application, and since then, even noted in then that these reptiles were coming back, and I'm sure that it's much improved. And one of the concerns I had in the ecology survey, it mentions a mitigation site, and I was just concerned, you know, moving of some of the reptiles off of this site onto a mitigation site, which it seems to me is that mitigation site will actually be affected, or potentially affected, because the other application for 1,650 units, I think that mitigation site is part of that. So these poor lizards are going to be moved off of this site onto another site, which is then going to be decimated potentially when there's a new site. There's a number of other issues. I'll just mention a couple. The tree survey, there's quite a lot. Even our tree officer mentioned an amount of ambiguity in the tree survey that was provided by the applicant. Although he did mention that some of the new trees, as you can see on that picture actually, are at the south of the site, and I think you can bet that unless they're well protected, within a year or two, the new occupants of some of these houses are going to be asking for them to be felled, because they're on the south of the site. They're going to cause a lot of shading on them, and we know what's going to happen if we're not careful to protect them. There's a number of points I'm not very happy with, but I did want to just clarify, after one point of clarification. The site is, as was mentioned, designated in the local plan. I think it's site SP16 for up to 1,600 dwellings on the site. So this site here that we're looking at is part of that wider SP16 site, isn't it? So those up to 1,600 dwellings can be delivered on this whole site, SP16, without this site, this particular site, being impacted at all, because the other application is for 1,650. So I just want to clarify, because this is part of that site doesn't mean we have to approve it because it's designated for housing. The whole SB16 is designated for housing, isn't it? So this part of SB16 might not be built on at all, not needed at all to be affected, and we could still deliver what's requested or what's mandated almost in the local plan. So maybe if somebody could just clarify that for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Before I bring in Councillor Everett, I'm going to bring back in and then Annabelle just to come back on a couple of points.
I'm just going to deal with the plan bit, and then Annabelle can clarify with regards to the habitat mitigation. As you say, it's part of the overall allocation, and the point that the report and looking at that principle is that this development wouldn't prejudice the ability of the overall allocation to bring forward that number of houses. In terms of obviously what's been proposed, it's obviously proposed to develop this site and it is part of the allocation. So the principle of development is acceptable for residential development on this site. The hypothetical of this site doesn't get delivered and the rest of the dwellings are built on the rest of the allocation isn't what's being proposed. And we can't compare it to that. We have to look at the merits of the case in front. And in this instance, it's the principle of development is that the site is allocated for housing. And therefore, it's about the merits and indeed of the other considerations that can be looked at. We'll just bring Annabelle in about the mitigation.
Yes, sorry, just going back to this landscape plan, there's an area here and areas to the rear of the site here that are actually the mitigation for the reptiles, etc. So it would be on-site mitigation, so it's not moving them away from the site. It may be just containing them in certain areas of the site. But yes, it has been noticed from the ecological reports that they are coming back, and KCC, as our ecology advisor, are in agreement with those mitigation areas. So,
Thank you, Annabelle. Councillor Everett.
Okay, sorry, can I just quickly come back just while it's being discussed? Just come back on what Mr. Livingstone said, so as we can all just fully understand it. So, in fact, you're saying that the applicant, St John's College, Cambridge, actually, they've been quite clever or quite well planned in how they've done this, in that by bringing this forward first, they've made it difficult for us to refuse it, whereas if they'd have done it all in one go, they could have delivered what we've asked them to, or what they've got mandated in the local plan, without having to do all this to the heritage assets that they had talked about being so concerned about protecting.
I must admit, I don't know the background behind the overall allocation. So I think the key bit here may be that we sometimes have strategic allocations, not necessarily of Birchington scale, but you can obviously have multiple sites that are allocated under one policy, but actually they've got multiple different owners. Obviously, the application that's been submitted for the much larger housing site has obviously been put forward on the basis of Patamagan Land, who obviously have a discrete option on that land to develop it for housing. And obviously that will, at some point, come before members of the committee to determine. Again, I think it does come back to, we have to consider what's in front of us. That's not committed development, it hasn't got planning permission, and therefore it needs to be put in the context of the policy framework. And in this instance, obviously, it is an allocated housing site, and the main issue with the overall policy is just to make sure that we're not prejudicing it. The example, without going on too long because I appreciate it's late, the example I'd give you is one in Briery Close that members may have been familiar with, which was part of the Westgate allocation a number of years ago, and it came forward for development when the overall allocation was being proposed, and it was refused by the council on the basis that it would prejudice the overall development coming forward because it was a piecemeal development. Well, that was overturned by an inspector who considered that it was self-contained, it didn't harm the ability of the wider site to come forward, and this is exactly the same. It's a case in point. So we don't have any significant concerns about the impact on the overall strategic allocation. Thanks.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Everett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, it seems to me there's an awful lot of work going on here just to develop 7 properties. There are 35 conditions in the planning report. I think, if I understood correctly, there's going to be another one which was mentioned at the start of the meeting about traffic. I understand that local people may not want to see this site developed, and I listened to what was said in that respect. I think, for me, the issue would be about the impact on Minnis Bay and on the traffic lights. As it happens, I was down there earlier this week because I had to go to a wake at one of the venues down at the seafront. And I'm always amazed by that junction. It's clearly not very satisfactory, very modern, or much that anyone could do about it. But I look at the fact there are only 7 properties there, and I look at the fact that KCC are able to reach an agreement about how that junction would operate, and I'm not really persuaded by the idea that having 7 properties there is going to make it significantly worse. And I think, I absolutely accept that there are traffic queues there in the summer, and that it's very far from being an ideal situation, but I don't think that the addition of the traffic from those properties is going to make a significant difference, and certainly not significant enough to reject this application. So I think that in terms of what's actually proposed, that it's quite a nice development, and I think it makes good use of the heritage assets, and as much as we might like to think that the owners would have maintained them and looked after them in a proper state without the incentive that they've got in terms of making money out of a development, I think that's probably not the real world, so I should be voting in favour of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Orban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I like it. Just pure and simple. The renovation of the 2 listed structures is to be welcomed, whether or not they've been left to go into rot a little bit, a bit like Thanet District Council with its listed buildings. We don't do anything with them either, most of them. I think this is a decent development. The design of the buildings and the new buildings fits in. I think it's lovely. It's self-contained in that area. It is part of the policy that we've got as part of a housing policy, and I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it can't be denied it's not an unattractive, not an unattractive site. But the land is allocated for housing. Appealing as the idea of 7 new properties is, I very much doubt these will be affordable. And it is, to me, seems a great pity that a great deal of the heritage of the area will be lost, apart from the obvious potential impact on highways. So, yeah, I'm a bit torn. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 3 more speakers, and then I will draw a line under this debate. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I spoke earlier. To be fair, I don't think 7 houses are going to make much difference to the traffic at Middlesbrough. I go through there an awful lot, and in the summer I just go the back way anyway. So I mean, most locals will do that anyway. They won't go through the bridge. That's just for the tourists. So I don't think it's a major issue. Don't look at me like that, Linda. You know damn well they go the back way. Well, more for you. So realistically, those traffic lights won't make much difference to the traffic at all in and out of the village. So I think it's a good idea, and I believe, by talking to Mr. Vallick today, that the other properties that Councillor Garner was talking about will have an entrance further up the road, nearer the doctor's surgery rather than this end. So, and that'll probably be by a roundabout anyway. So the traffic flow is going to increase if that gets approved anyway. And 7 houses isn't going to make much difference really to Minnis Bay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to come back on that in terms of the other application, I think the reality is the extent of highway mitigation for the strategic site is extensive, and indeed encompasses parts of Minnis Road as well as other junctions. Obviously includes a brand new infrastructure as well. That is something that's going to need to be considered for that application, and given that if this is approved, this will be committed development, that this would then have to be taken into account in the Birchington application. One follows the other. So yeah, there are potential for other mitigation schemes, but obviously that's not as part of this proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Crittenden.
Thank you. I've been quite conflicted at the start of this debate, and so I've been listening to what everyone else has to say, and I'm still conflicted. Like others, I'm not sure that 7 houses will make a huge difference on the traffic, and there's a lot I like about it. But what I haven't heard is really anything that addresses what the presentation was at the beginning from Councillors Cupp and Fellows about the wider historic issues that will be impacted on this area. I've heard a lot about preserving buildings, but not necessarily the wider area. And I guess one question I have is, can I just double check Do we have any choice? Will this be built on because it's going to get built on, whether it's this one or another one? Or is it, is it designated? I think is the right word. I think I've heard it is, but I just want to double check that.
It's on the local plan. I'll bring back in.
Yeah, so it's designated. Obviously, depending on the decision, it depends on any successful appeal. Obviously, depending on what's refused. I think just to come back on the main point in terms of archaeology. Obviously, they have produced a desk-based evaluation that has been looked at by the county archaeologist. County archaeologist has agreed with the assessment that's been done and has recommended specific conditions that have been required, which would need to be carried out, prior to the development commencing as a Grampian condition to ensure that both the field evaluation works are undertaken and any fines are recorded. There's also a building recording condition as well. So you've got both. You've got the built heritage and then you've also got the other heritage as well in terms of underground. So whilst obviously the significance has been outlined in terms of the site, obviously we rely on the professional opinion of the county archaeologist to give us the view on whether or not what the applicant has proposed is sufficient to accord with policy HE1 and is considered that it would. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Wing, and then as I'm drawing a line.
Just distracted
Don't worry.
by a
don't
diabetic alarm. I need clarification on one point, which I think two of my colleagues have tried to get to the bottom of, and it confused me in a previous planning application some time back, so I'm trying to educate myself going forward. If a site is allocated for 100 houses, and we get to 100 houses, and then somebody wants to build 10 more, do we have different powers? That's the first. That's the first thing I'd like to clear up in my head.
So, the allocation of housing sites usually includes a notional number. So most of our allocations have a broad amount of houses that's all in a big table at the back of the plan. The main allocations, though, so in this instance, the 5 strategic allocations, all have a up to number. Which is obviously based around housing need, distribution of housing, infrastructure, all that sort of stuff. If a number of applications come forward that exceed that amount, the question would be whether or not that's contrary to the policy or whether or not it could be considered. Now, in likelihood, any strategic planning application on those big sites is coming before members. So if we are outlining to members that it's contrary to this policy because of this, we'd obviously have to be saying why we think it's acceptable. So, again, this is showing I've been here too long, but the case of Westwood Cross, we had an application years ago where we had the big allocation and it was approved as 1,100, I think it was, and then we had a subsequent application on the end, but within the allocation for more houses for another 40, I think it was, or something like that. And there were concerns raised about the fact that we were adding them on when they weren't needed. Now, that was a very different policy framework at that point, and obviously it's much more permissive now, subject to considerations. So I think, this is factored into the other allocation. It does kind of whittle down the number to some extent that can be afforded to the overall site, but it's all about what's mitigated with the bigger site when it comes forward.
Okay, so I won't comment on what other people have said, but it's been really useful. I want to concentrate on water. And it's very interesting. It's always interesting when you have ward councillors or councillors that know the area that drop into some information, and I think flooding was mentioned. So do we have any report from Southern Water at all?
We've got a comment in the report. Flooding, has into do with, are we talking foul drainage or surface water? Because what's been discussed is surface water.
It was mentioned here, under the bridge. So my concern is that there will be increased there will be two ways flooding could be impacted here. First of all, we've got an increased number of residential properties which will use and create additional wastewater which will enter our system. Then what I don't think many of us think about is we now have presently a piece of porous land which water goes through, and the biggest problem with flooding is surface water. We're now putting non-porous structures footpaths and roadways into this area. So in a sense, we're going to, as a byproduct, increase the amount of water that is surface water and decrease the amount which flows in naturally through our chalk substrata. And it goes back to us needing to understand we have a critical problem with our water and flooding and discharges into the sea. And I would like to see more information from Southern Water. They're not our statutory bodies to consult with, but in the 2 Southern Water meetings I've been to, they said if they were asked, they would produce the information. So I'm linking the 2 things together. I would like to understand better the flooding and the reason for the flooding, and I'd like Southern Water to model the situation that these houses will create, and possibly the hundreds of other houses that are created. Also, the loss of farmland is never going to sit well with me. I also have concerns about the loss of trees and habitats, because in developments in Ramsgate, further down on the West Cliff, we've approved the application and we've said that all these trees around here are going to be protected, and then suddenly people move into the properties, like Councillor Garner says, and we suddenly see trees being felled left, right and centre. So I think we need to start, and I don't know whether we can, insisting that trees are protected within development so that it's not easy for people who come onto site to start taking them down. So there are my concerns. The potential flooding, which I think we need greater information about, particularly as it's been mentioned by people who know the area more, and also the protection of some of that habitat, which, they say they're going to put a wildlife certain things in, but how can we ensure the trees that remain are protected and the ones that are replace the ones that are cut down are protected for future generations? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Once again, bring in.
So in terms of drainage, condition 3 is a Grampian condition, which is to deal with foul water and surface water. So specifically would look at the surface water arrangements that are being proposed on the site. Again, hearing what Councillor's saying, it is common knowledge about the underneath the railway bridge in terms of surface water flooding. Obviously, what the applicant will need to do in submitting those information to us is demonstrate that there's no increase in runoff off this site, basically, in certain storm events. So that is what that condition is trying to secure and ensure doesn't happen. So this development couldn't contribute to surface water problems that are pre-existing. In terms of foul water, Southern Water have commented with regards to the main present. So they've given a comment on the application. They haven't given a survey of the infrastructure in the area. This is where planning crosses over with the Water Infrastructure Act, which obviously requires Southern Water to offer a connection to anyone wanting to build a house, but it allows Southern Water to charge them the privilege of doing so when looking at the capacity of the network in the local area, and therefore providing a tariff-based system where they pay to increase the capacity when they're connecting to the drainage network. So that's mandated through the Water Infrastructure Act. Obviously, what we need to ensure is that they've got adequate arrangements for foul water. That's also covered through building regs as well. But obviously, in terms of that point about capacity, which I know is a particular issue, that is covered for by the Water Infrastructure Act. Obviously, I'm not going to get into Southern Water's effectiveness of that. That's not a planning consideration, unfortunately. But back to the surface water, we do think the condition is sufficient. Especially given that it's a Grampian condition, and that means that obviously they cannot do any development until they've cleared that condition. So we think that's sufficient to deal with surface water on this site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Right. I know Councillor Wright wanted to speak again, but I did say I was going to draw a line. Right, members, it's down to yourselves. The application is for approval. Would those please show if you are in favour? Please show of hands. Those against? Abstentions? Right, let's have a... Did you have a count up?
Yeah. 4 in favour, 6 against, 2 abstentions.
Right, that has fallen, members. Right.
Apologies, I'm slightly surprised about that. Okay, so there is, so if the motion has fallen, there's no, I think any member that wants to propose a motion, I think I'm going to hark back to the olden days and suggest a very brief adjournment for them to approach the bench to have a discussion, because from hearing the debate, I haven't heard any reasons for refusal. So,
If I can turn the microphone off and. I'm going to have 5 minutes adjournment, and if I think we all feel the same there, and any member who wishes to come up with a proposal, I would be grateful. Thank you, members. Thank you, members. Councillor Coleman Cook. Be quiet. All right.
You spoke.
I'm going to hand over to Ian for a moment. We have had some points put forward to us, which Ian will touch on, and then we will put the proposal to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So following discussions with members and hearing the particular points that have been raised, I think the officer recommendation at this point, given that the motion to approve has fallen, would be to recommend for a site visit to occur, for the site to be looked at with further clarifications from officers to provide in a subsequent planning meeting with regards to archaeology, drainage, trees and impact on biodiversity. We need a proposer.
Right, that, if members understand that, need a proposer for a site visit. Councillor Garner put his hand up first.
Yeah, I'll propose that.
Thank you. Councillor Crittenden has seconded. Do members agree? Those who in favour of a site visit, please show their hands. Those who are against?
6 for casting.
I'm going to go for a site visit. We haven't had one for a long, long time. Okay. Okay. Members, that's quite a long evening tonight, but gone through a lot. As always, thank you very much to officers and members, and especially those who've been subs tonight. Thank you for coming along.